Hello there, and welcome to my channel. I'm so glad you found your way here today. Tonight we're settling into something a little different. Not the stars, not the ocean, but a question that has followed human beings for thousands of years. Why do certain connections feel less like meeting someone new and more like remembering someone you already knew? We're going to look at twin flames, where the idea came from, how far it has traveled, and what real psychology can tell us about why it feels so powerful. Some of what we'll cover is ancient philosophy. Some of it is modern belief. And some of it is simply the quiet science of how your own mind builds closeness. There's no need to hold on to any of it tightly tonight. Just let it drift past you the way a good story should. And before we begin, if you enjoy what I share here, please leave a like and hit subscribe. It's how others find their way to this little corner too. Now let's begin. Long before anyone used the words twin flame, a philosopher in ancient Greece was already telling a story about longing. In Plato's dialogue times, Symposium times, a character named Aristophanes offers a strange and beautiful myth. Humans, he says, were once whole beings, round and complete, with 4 arms, 4 legs, and 2 faces looking out in opposite directions. These early humans were powerful, perhaps too powerful, and the god Zeus grew wary of their strength. So he split each one in half, sending the 2 pieces out into the world alone. From that moment on, according to the myth, every person has wandered the earth searching for their missing half, driven by a longing they can't quite name. It's a myth, not a scientific claim, but its emotional logic is easy to recognize. You've likely felt some version of it yourself, that quiet sense that a person once found completes something. Aristophanes never used the word soulmate, and certainly never twin flame, yet the shape of his story is unmistakable. 2 halves once whole, searching for reunion. This idea didn't stay locked in an old book. It moved quietly through centuries of poetry, philosophy, and folklore, resurfacing again and again in new forms. What began as an explanation for the strange ache of loneliness became, over time, one of the oldest templates for the human idea of a destined partner. Tonight, as you listen, you don't need to search for anything. You're already exactly whole enough to rest. Here's something that might surprise you. Despite its mythic, timeless feel, the actual phrase, twin flame, is not ancient at all. It carries no lineage back to Plato, no direct thread to old Greek philosophy, no verified roots in ancient scripture. Instead, it emerged from 20th century spiritual movements, particularly the New Age currents that swept through the 1970s and 80s. Writers and spiritual teachers of that era borrowed older ideas about soul union and reshaped them into something new, giving it a fresh name that sounded both mystical and modern. The word flame was chosen deliberately, evoking warmth, intensity, and a kind of burning recognition unlike ordinary affection. It was meant to feel different from soulmate, which by then had already become common, even a little worn from overuse in everyday conversation. So while the emotional experience, the term, tries to describe instant recognition, deep resonance, may be as old as human connection itself, the specific label is only a few generations old. You are, in a sense, living inside a very young word, wrapped around a very old feeling. That's not a flaw in the idea. It simply means the language evolves, even when the ache underneath doesn't. Human beings have always needed new words for old longings, reshaping them generation after generation to fit their own time. Tonight you don't need any word at all for whatever you're feeling. Just the stillness of letting it settle gently without needing to be named. Within twin flame belief, there's an important distinction that separates it from the older, more familiar idea of a soulmate. A soulmate in most traditions can be one of many. A close friend, a sibling, a mentor, a romantic partner, each connection valid and meaningful in its own way. A twin flame, believers insist, is different. It is said to be singular, one soul divided at its origin into 2 separate human lives, destined eventually to recognize each other. Where a soulmate offers companionship, A twin flame is described as offering something closer to a mirror. The relationship in this framework isn't just close. It's said to reflect a person's own inner self back at them, flaws and strengths alike, often with startling intensity. Some describe this mirroring as beautiful. Others describe it as uncomfortable, even destabilizing, precisely because it exposes so much. This is one reason twin flame stories so often include conflict alongside closeness. A mirror doesn't just show your best angles. It shows everything. Believers often describe recognizing a twin flame not through comfort but through a kind of internal shake, as though something long buried has been quietly uncovered. Whether or not you believe in a singular soul split into two, there's something worth noticing in the underlying wish. It's the hope that another person could truly see you, without performance, without editing. That wish doesn't require any myth to be real. It's simply quietly yours. At its core, twin flame theory rests on one central claim, that a single soul at some point beyond memory, split into two, each half sent, to live an entirely separate human life. Unlike reincarnation, which usually describes one soul moving through many lifetimes in sequence, this idea imagines two halves existing simultaneously, often unaware of each other for years, sometimes for decades. Believers describe these two lives unfolding on entirely different paths, shaped by different families, different countries, different struggles, until some invisible pull eventually draws them back together. The moment of meeting in these stories is rarely framed as ordinary chance. It's framed as recognition, the sense that some deep, wordless part of you already knows this person before a single conversation happens. You might have heard someone describe this feeling before, that instant, unplaceable familiarity with a total stranger. Twin flame theory takes that fleeting, common experience and gives it a cosmic explanation, turning a passing feeling into a lifelong narrative. It's a compelling story, no doubt, especially for anyone who has ever felt a spark of connection they couldn't quite explain in ordinary terms. Whether or not a soul can literally divide in two, the underlying human experience it points toward is real enough. People do sometimes feel struck without warning by a sense of familiarity toward someone new. That feeling deserves curiosity, not judgment, and certainly no urgency to solve tonight. It can simply rest here with you, unexplained and still gentle. The 1970s were a turning point for spiritual life across much of the Western world. Traditional religious structures were loosening their hold on younger generations, and, in that open space, a wave of new spiritual movements began to rise. People were drawn toward astrology, meditation, energy healing, and ideas borrowed and reshaped from Eastern philosophy, often blended together into something distinctly new. It was inside this cultural moment that twin flame belief truly found its footing, moving from scattered philosophical fragments into something closer to an organized spiritual concept. Small spiritual communities and independent teachers began writing about soul unions, energetic frequencies, and destined partnerships, often self-published, passed hand to hand at gatherings and workshops. This was long before social media, so ideas spread slowly through pamphlets, retreats, and word of mouth between people hungry for new spiritual language. Over the following decades, that slow spread would eventually accelerate, but its true root sits firmly in that 1970s revival, a period defined by searching experimentation and a hunger for meaning outside conventional institutions. You might recognize a similar hunger in yourself, sometimes a wish for explanations that feel bigger than the everyday. That hunger isn't unusual, it's simply part of being human in an uncertain world. Entire spiritual movements have been built from that same quiet ache, generation after generation, each one reaching for language sturdy enough to hold the weight of longing. Tonight, you don't need any movement at all. Just rest unhurried is enough. Twin flame belief didn't stay vague and scattered for long. In the following years, specific spiritual organizations picked up the concept and gave it real structure, turning loose ideas into something closer to formal doctrine. One especially influential thread came through movements descended from the earlier I Am spiritual teachings, which themselves stretched back to the 1930s. Later groups built on that foundation, incorporating twin flame language directly into their broader teachings about ascended souls, spiritual evolution, and destined unions. These organizations published books, held structured seminars, and trained teachers who carried the concept further outward, well beyond their original small communities. This is how a loosely mythic idea, once scattered across old philosophy and folk belief, became something closer to an organized spiritual system, with its own vocabulary and internal logic. Formal structure changes how an idea spreads. It gives people specific language to describe intangible feelings, specific stages to expect, specific signs to watch for. That structure can bring comfort, offering clarity where before there was only vague longing. It can also bring pressure, especially when someone's real relationship doesn't match the tidy stages described in a book. It's worth remembering that even deeply organized spiritual systems started somewhere small, shaped by particular people, particular decades, particular cultural needs. None of that makes the underlying human longing for connection any less real for you. It simply means the framework around it was built piece by piece, by people not so different from you reaching for words to hold something enormous. Beyond Plato's famous myth, other threads of ancient Greek thought also touched on the idea of paired or completed souls, even if none of them used language resembling twin flame. Some philosophical schools discussed the soul as something capable of division, or as carrying an essential counterpart somewhere in the universe. Greek mystery traditions, the more secretive spiritual practices that existed alongside public religion, sometimes described spiritual union in symbolic paired imagery, though much of that material survives only in fragments today. Historians studying these traditions are often careful here, because fragments invite interpretation, and interpretation can easily drift into wishful reconstruction. What can be said with more confidence is this: the general shape of one soul, two parts searching for reunion, appears in more than one strand of ancient Greek thought, not just Plato's. That repetition matters. It suggests the longing for a matched, mirrored connection wasn't an isolated idea, invented once and forgotten. It kept resurfacing independently, across different thinkers and different generations, as though the feeling itself demanded expression again and again. You might notice that same pull in your own life, a wish for someone who understands you without lengthy explanation. That wish has apparently been showing up in written form for over 2,000 years, carried forward by people who, like you, were simply trying to make sense of connection. It's a strangely comforting thought. Whatever you long for tonight, you're in very old company. Let that thought settle instead of stir, soft and unhurried, as your body begins to loosen toward rest. Across centuries of folklore, from European fairy tales to Middle Eastern poetry to Asian spiritual texts, the idea of a soulmate has almost always been flexible. Different cultures describe soulmates as friends, siblings, mentors, or lovers, and most traditions allow a person to have more than one across a lifetime. This flexibility gave the soulmate concept enormous staying power, because it could bend to fit nearly any meaningful relationship a person experienced. Twin flame belief takes a narrower, more exclusive shape. Only one twin flame is said to exist for each person, a single mirrored counterpart, rather than a wide circle of possible matches. This singularity is part of what makes the concept feel so weighty to those who believe in it. If a soulmate is one of many doors, a twin flame is described as the only door, the one built specifically for you and no one else. That kind of exclusivity carries real emotional stakes. It raises the pressure on any relationship, framed this way sometimes to an uncomfortable degree, because there's no room left for the idea of trying again with someone new. Folklore researchers note that this narrowing away from plurality is fairly unusual across mythic traditions, most of which prefer flexible multiple paths toward connection rather than a single fated one. It's worth sitting with that difference for a moment, not to judge either framework, but simply to notice how much weight a single word like one can carry. Tonight, you don't need to carry any of that weight. Just breathe slow and unhurried exactly where you are. Inside twin flame belief connection is often described using the language of vibration and frequency, borrowed loosely from physics, but applied in a spiritual symbolic sense rather than a literal scientific one. Believers describe each soul as carrying its own unique energetic signature, and a twin flame is said to share that exact signature down to its finest detail. When two people who are twin flames meet, the belief holds their frequencies recognize each other, instantly producing that unmistakable spark so often described in twin flame stories. This language of vibration became especially popular as New Age spirituality absorbed loose scientific terms during the 20th century, blending real physics vocabulary with metaphysical meaning in ways that sound scientific without being measurable by any actual instrument. It's worth being clear here. There is no verified way to measure a person's spiritual frequency, and no accepted scientific method has ever confirmed such a thing exists. That doesn't make the underlying experience people describe meaningless. Something does happen in the body during instant connection, a real physiological shift involving attention, arousal, and emotion, even if it has nothing to do with literal vibrational frequency. Metaphor is powerful, precisely because it gives shape to feelings that resist plain description. Saying our frequencies matched may simply be a poetic way of saying something in me responded intensely and immediately, which is a real documented human experience, even without any spiritual framework attached. You've likely felt that kind of instant response before toward a person, a place, even a piece of music. Let that be enough tonight, without needing further explanation. Long before New Age movements adopted the language of twin flames, Hindu and Vedic traditions were already exploring rich ideas about divine union and paired souls, though framed in very different terms and for very different purposes. Certain schools of Hindu philosophy describe the individual soul or Atman as fundamentally connected to a universal consciousness, sometimes envisioned through paired or complementary divine figures. The union of Shiva and Shakti, representing consciousness and creative energy respectively, is one especially well-known example, symbolizing balance rather than romantic destiny in the way modern twin flame belief often frames things. These older traditions weren't originally about finding one specific romantic partner on Earth. They were more often about spiritual completion, the soul's relationship to the divine as a whole, expressed through symbolic imagery rather than literal human matchmaking. When New Age teachers in the 20th century began shaping twin flame doctrine, some borrowed language and imagery from these older Eastern traditions, reinterpreting ancient symbolic concepts into something closer to a specific romantic prophecy. This kind of cultural borrowing and reshaping happens often throughout spiritual history. Ideas traveling across centuries and continents, changing meaning as they move between contexts. It doesn't necessarily diminish either tradition, but it is worth knowing where borrowed language actually originated and how far its meaning may have shifted from its source. Ancient philosophy, it turns out, has more nuance and depth than any modern reinterpretation can fully capture. Let that depth settle around you quietly tonight without needing to be fully understood before sleep finds you. For most of its history, twin flame belief spread slowly, carried by books, small workshops, and word of mouth between people already interested in spirituality. That pace changed dramatically with the rise of social media. Short videos, personal testimonials, and easily shareable spiritual content gave twin flame ideas a speed of distribution earlier generations of teachers could never have imagined. A single video describing 11 signs you've met your twin flame can now reach millions of viewers within days, far outside any dedicated spiritual community. This shift changed not just the scale of the belief, but its texture too. Where twin flame teaching once required seeking out a book or attending a retreat, it now arrives unprompted, woven into a person's everyday scrolling, alongside cooking videos and news clips. Algorithms, designed to show people more of what already holds their attention, have proven especially effective at spreading emotionally intense spiritual content, twin flame stories among them. Because such content tends to provoke strong feelings, and strong feelings keep people watching. Researchers studying online spiritual communities have noted this pattern extends well beyond twin flame belief, but the concept has become one of its most visible examples online. You may have come across this kind of content yourself in a passing moment of scrolling, arriving in your feed just when you didn't expect it. That's simply how digital spaces work now, connecting old ideas with new audiences at remarkable speed. Tonight, none of that speed matters. There's nowhere else you need to be and nothing more you need to scroll toward. Numbers alone can be hard to feel, so let's bring this one down to something more familiar. Across one major video platform, content, tagged with twin flame themes, has collectively gathered billions of views, a figure so large it resists ordinary imagination. Picture instead a single stadium, filled to capacity with tens of thousands of people. Now imagine that same stadium filling and emptying, over and over, day after day, for years without pause. Even then, you'd still fall short of the true total. That's the scale we're talking about, not a niche corner of the internet, but a genuinely massive current of shared attention. What's notable here isn't just the size of the number, but what it reveals about human curiosity. People are not simply stumbling onto this content by accident and clicking away. They are searching for it, returning to it, sharing it with friends who might relate. Underneath every one of those views sits a real person pausing their day for a few minutes, wondering whether some experience they had actually meant something larger than it seemed. Content creators have noticed this pattern too, describing twin flame videos as some of the most reliably watched material in the entire spiritual and relationship category online. It says less about any twin flame's cosmic reality and more about how many people quietly carry the same question you might carry yourself sometimes. Am I truly seen by anyone? That question doesn't need billions of views to matter. It only needs one honest, unhurried moment, like this one right now, as you let your body soften into the mattress beneath you. Nearly every twin flame story, whether shared online in books or between friends over coffee, includes some version of the same central moment. Two people meet, often unexpectedly, and something happens that feels entirely different from ordinary attraction. It's frequently described, not as growing interest, but as immediate recognition, as though a stranger has suddenly become deeply familiar within seconds. People describe a rush of heat, a tightening in the chest, sometimes even tears, all triggered by nothing more than eye contact or a first exchange of words. This moment is treated within twin flame belief as undeniable proof, the clearest possible sign that something fated is unfolding. It's worth pausing here gently, without dismissing the experience itself, because the feeling described is absolutely real for the people who report it. What's less certain is the explanation attached to it. Intense, sudden emotional responses to a new person do happen, and they can feel enormous in the moment they occur. Whether that response comes from a cosmic soul match or from ordinary human chemistry novelty, and unconscious pattern recognition is a separate question entirely, one we'll come back to gently later tonight. For now, simply notice how universal this particular story beat is. Across countless retellings in different languages, different countries, different decades, the same core moment repeats almost exactly. Instant recognition, overwhelming and undeniable. That repetition alone tells you something true, even if the explanation remains open. Human beings, it seems, have always been capable of feeling struck by another person quickly and completely, long before anyone gave that feeling a name. Twin flame belief rarely exists in isolation. It frequently overlaps with astrology, another spiritual framework with its own long, separate history, stretching back thousands of years to ancient Babylon, and later refined through Greek and Roman tradition. Within many online astrology communities, certain zodiac sign pairings have become popularly associated with twin flame potential, often based on elements believed to complement each other. Fire signs paired with air signs, for instance, or water signs paired with earth signs. Lists circulate widely, online ranking which signs are considered most likely to form a twin flame connection, often accompanied by detailed explanations of why particular traits are thought to align. It's worth noting plainly that no scientific study has ever found evidence connecting birth timing to relationship compatibility of this kind. Astrology remains, by any rigorous standard, unverified as a predictive system, however old and culturally rich its traditions may be. Still, the popularity of these pairings tells us something worth sitting with. People are drawn toward frameworks that offer clear categories and confident answers, especially around something as uncertain and emotionally loaded as love. A tidy chart, promising your ideal match based on birth month, offers a kind of comfort that open-ended uncertainty simply cannot. That comfort is real and understandable, even without any scientific basis behind it. You don't need a star chart tonight to know something true about yourself. Your own steady breath, slowing now, moving in and out, is a far more reliable signal than any zodiac pairing could ever offer. If you've spent any time in spaces that discuss twin flames, you've likely come across the number 1111, often described as a sign of impending twin flame connection or spiritual alignment. Numerology, the practice of finding symbolic meaning in numbers, has become deeply intertwined with twin flame belief, particularly around repeating digit sequences that some believers call angel numbers. Seeing 1111 repeatedly on clocks, receipts, or license plates is interpreted within this framework as a meaningful message rather than simple coincidence. There is a real psychological explanation for why this feels so convincing, and it doesn't require anything supernatural at all. Human brains are extraordinarily good at pattern recognition, a trait that served our ancestors well for survival, but that same trait can misfire in ordinary modern life. Once someone becomes primed to notice a specific number, their brain naturally starts flagging every instance of it, far more often than before, while ignoring the countless times it doesn't appear. This is sometimes called the frequency illusion, a well-documented effect where selective attention creates the feeling of a pattern that isn't statistically unusual at all. A clock reads 11:11 twice a day, every single day, whether or not anyone is watching for it. Noticing it more once you're primed to look isn't mystical. It's simply how attention works. None of this makes the felt experience meaningless, only more explainable. Tonight, if any numbers or thoughts keep circling back to you, let them pass by gently, without needing to chase their meaning. Your mind is allowed to just rest. Among the more striking claims within twin flame belief is the report of shared dreams, moments where two people, before they've ever met in waking life, describe dreaming of a very similar face, place, or feeling. When these two people eventually do meet, the earlier dream is treated as prophetic evidence, further proof of a fated connection reaching backward through time. These stories are genuinely compelling to hear, and the people sharing them are rarely being dishonest. Memory, however, works in far less reliable ways than most people assume, especially when it comes to dreams. Dream recall research consistently shows that people reconstruct dream memories after the fact, often unconsciously reshaping vague, fragmented dream content to better match a later, more vivid, real-life event. A blurry face in an old dream can easily become, in retrospect, that exact person, even if the original dream held no such clear detail at all. This isn't lying. It's simply how human memory naturally behaves, filling in gaps and smoothing inconsistencies to create a more coherent story after the fact. Dreams themselves remain genuinely mysterious, and sleep researchers continue actively studying how the brain generates them each night. What's better understood is how easily memory reshapes a dream once new emotionally significant information arrives afterward. None of this diminishes how meaningful the experience can feel to the person living it. It simply offers a gentler, more grounded explanation than fate reaching backward through time. Tonight, whatever dreams may drift through your own mind, let them come and go freely without needing to mean anything at all. It's easy to assume twin flame belief, and the ancient Chinese concept of yin and yang describe roughly the same idea, two halves forming a whole, but the philosophies underneath are actually quite different. Yin and yang, rooted in Taoist philosophy, dating back well over 2,000 years, describes complementary opposites existing everywhere, in nature, light and dark, motion and stillness, each containing a small trace of the other, constantly shifting and balancing rather than merging into a single fixed union. Crucially, yin and yang was never primarily about romantic partnership at all. It was a broader framework for understanding balance throughout the natural world, applied to medicine, seasons and philosophy, long before anyone linked it to soulmates. Twin flame belief, by contrast, centers specifically on one romantic or deeply personal bond, often framing that bond as a fixed singular destiny, rather than a fluid, ever-shifting balance. Where yin and yang embraces constant motion between opposites, twin flame belief tends to describe a single static endpoint, a person you are simply meant to find. This is a meaningful philosophical difference, even though the two ideas sometimes get casually blended together in modern spiritual spaces. Ancient philosophy, when examined closely, is rarely as tidy or simple as later reinterpretations suggest. Ideas travel, mix, and lose precision as centuries pass, much like a story slowly changing shape as it's retold from person to person. There's something oddly comforting in that complexity, the reminder that even old established wisdom keeps quietly evolving. Let your own thoughts feel free to drift and blend tonight too, without needing to resolve into anything fixed. The desire to find a twin flame has in recent years met modern technology head-on. Numerous apps and online quizzes now promise to identify a user's twin flame based on birth details, personality answers, or even facial analysis drawn from an uploaded photo. Some apps claim to calculate compatibility percentages, offering a tidy number meant to represent cosmic alignment between two people. It's worth being clear and direct here. No verified scientific method exists for measuring spiritual compatibility of this kind, and any app offering a precise twin flame percentage is working from spiritual interpretation, not measurable data. That doesn't necessarily make these tools harmful or without value. Many people use them the way they might read a horoscope, less as literal fact, and more as a playful lens for reflecting on their own relationships and desires. There is something genuinely human in that impulse, taking an abstract quiz seriously enough to enjoy it, while still holding it loosely enough not to reorganize your entire life around the result. Technology has simply given an old spiritual impulse a new, more convenient container, one that fits neatly into a phone screen rather than a book or a distant retreat. Whether through an ancient oracle, a tarot deck, or a modern app interface, people have always sought external tools to help make sense of uncertain feelings. The tool changes with each era. The underlying wish to understand connection stays remarkably the same. Tonight there's no app you need open, no quiz left to finish, just this quiet moment, entirely enough, exactly as it is. Many twin flame narratives extend beyond a single lifetime, weaving in the belief that two souls have met and loved each other across multiple past lives before finding one another again in the present. This connects twin flame belief closely to reincarnation, an ancient concept found across numerous spiritual traditions, particularly within Hinduism and Buddhism, though interpreted quite differently within each. In these older traditions, reincarnation typically centers on spiritual growth and karma across an individual's soul's many lives, rather than a search for one specific repeated romantic partner. Twin flame teachers have often borrowed the general framework of returning souls, while reshaping its focus specifically toward romantic reunion, layering modern relationship narratives onto ancient religious concepts about spiritual progress. Believers sometimes describe déjà vu, unexplained emotional intensity, or an inexplicable sense of familiarity with a new partner, as evidence of a shared past life together. There is no scientific method currently capable of verifying claims about past lives, and reincarnation itself remains a matter of religious and philosophical belief, rather than established fact. Still, the emotional appeal of this idea is easy to understand. It offers a story where difficult present-day relationships carry deeper meaning, framed as unfinished business carried forward across lifetimes, rather than simply present-day complexity. That kind of narrative can feel comforting during confusing or painful chapters of a relationship, even without empirical support behind it. Human beings have always reached for larger stories to hold difficult feelings. Tonight you don't need a past life or a future one. Just this single present moment, quiet and settling, is enough. We've traveled a long distance already tonight, from an old Greek myth about split souls, through New Age spiritual movements, astrology, numerology, and now into apps and algorithms. What started as a philosophical explanation for human longing has over the decades become something else entirely, a fully formed commercial industry built around that same ancient ache. Books, coaching programs, retreats, tarot decks, and online courses now generate real revenue from people seeking clarity about their own twin flame journey. This transformation from myth to marketplace isn't unique to twin flame belief. Many spiritual and self-help concepts follow a similar path, moving from philosophical origin towards structured products designed to meet a very real emotional need. There's no need for cynicism here, only clear eyes. People building these products are often responding to a genuine hunger, the same hunger for meaning and connection that has existed since Plato first wrote his myth of divided souls thousands of years ago. What's changed is the scale and speed of how that hunger gets met, now instantly available through a screen rather than a rare encounter with a wandering philosopher or a distant spiritual teacher. As we move forward tonight, we're going to shift focus a little away from the industry and mythology and toward the real psychology. Underneath all of this, the parts of your own mind that make instant connection, recognition, and longing feel so powerful in the first place. That part of the story is quieter, more grounded, and in its own way even more remarkable. Let yourself settle a little deeper now, ready for what comes next. Let's slow down for a moment and look closely at just how many people are quietly typing these words into a search bar each month. Across the world, searches related to twin flames number in the millions monthly, a figure that includes people searching in the middle of the night, unable to sleep, wondering about someone from their past. Picture a mid-sized city, one with a population near 1 million residents. Now imagine every single person in that entire city searching the same phrase once in just 1 month. Even that vivid image only accounts for a fraction of the true global total. This isn't a small, isolated curiosity confined to a niche corner of spiritual practice. It's a sustained worldwide pattern of searching month after month, year after year, without any sign of slowing. Search engine data researchers who study spiritual and relationship topics note that twin flame searches tend to spike during certain emotional periods, particularly after breakups, during major life transitions, or late at night when reflective thoughts tend to surface most easily. That timing tells its own quiet story. People aren't typically searching this phrase during ordinary settled moments. They're searching during uncertainty, when they're reaching for some kind of explanation or reassurance. You might recognize that instinct in yourself, the pull to search for answers when something feels unresolved. It's an entirely human response shared by millions of people you'll never meet, all searching in the same quiet hours you might be listening right now. Let that shared search, that shared reaching, feel a little less lonely tonight, resting alongside you as your own thoughts begin to slow. On one major photo-sharing platform alone, posts tagged with twin flame themes number well past 10 million. A quiet but staggering archive of personal stories, quotes, and reflections shared by people around the world. To make that number feel real, imagine a single photograph printed and placed end to end. 10 million photographs laid flat would stretch for hundreds of miles, farther than many countries are wide. Behind every one of those images sits a real person, choosing at some specific moment to share a piece of their inner life publicly, hoping perhaps that someone else scrolling past might feel understood by it too. Some of these posts are quiet and reflective, a quote paired with a sunset. Others are deeply personal, detailing years of longing separation or reunion with striking vulnerability. Social researchers studying online self-expression note that spiritual and relationship content tends to attract unusually high levels of personal disclosure compared to other topics, likely because it touches something people rarely discuss openly in daily conversation: their private hopes about being deeply, completely known by another person. That's a tender thing to share publicly again and again by millions of separate individuals who will likely never meet each other in real life. There's something quietly moving in that collective vulnerability, even setting aside any belief in twin flames themselves. It suggests an enormous shared undercurrent of longing running through people everywhere, expressed in millions of small, individual posts. You are far from alone in whatever quiet longing you might carry tonight. Let that thought rest with you gently now, as your body continues to soften towards sleep. Walk into a larger bookstore today, particularly one with a well-developed spirituality or self-help section, and you'll likely find something that wouldn't have existed a few decades ago. Shelves specifically organized around twin flame literature. Dozens of titles now exist, exploring the topic from nearly every possible angle. Personal memoirs describing individual twin flame journeys, structured guidebooks outlining supposed stages of connection, and broader spiritual texts weaving twin flame belief into wider frameworks about soul purpose and awakening. Publishing industry data shows steady, consistent growth in spiritual and metaphysical book sales over the past 2 decades, with relationship-focused spiritual titles, twin flame books included, representing one of the more reliably strong categories within that broader growth. This matters because publishing a physical book requires real commitment, both from authors willing to write extensively on the subject and from publishers willing to invest in printing and distribution. A sustained shelf of titles, rather than 1 or 2 isolated books, signals genuine, ongoing demand, rather than a brief passing trend. Independent authors have also entered this space in large numbers, self-publishing their own twin flame guides and memoirs, further expanding the total volume of available literature well beyond traditional publishing houses. Whether or not you've ever picked up one of these books yourself, their steady presence on physical shelves says something meaningful about widespread cultural interest in this particular kind of longing. Somewhere tonight, someone is probably reading one of these books by lamplight, searching for their own answers. You don't need a book open tonight. Just this quiet moment is enough. Beyond books and social media content, an entire coaching industry has grown up specifically around twin flame belief, offering personalized guidance to people navigating what they understand as their own twin flame journey. These coaches, some self-taught, others formally certified through specific spiritual training programs, offer services ranging from single consultation calls to extended multi-month coaching packages. Pricing varies widely, but sessions can range from around $50 for a shorter consultation up towards several $100s for more extensive packages, with some specialized retreats costing considerably more once travel, lodging are included. Industry analysts tracking the broader spiritual services market estimate the wider coaching and wellness industry, twin flame coaching included, generates revenue reaching well into the billions of dollars globally each year. This scale reflects something worth noticing carefully: a genuine, widespread willingness among people to invest real money into understanding their relationships and inner lives more deeply. That willingness isn't foolish. Seeking guidance during confusing emotional periods is a completely reasonable human impulse, one that has existed in various forms throughout history, from ancient oracles to modern licensed therapists. The specific twin flame framing is relatively new, but the underlying instinct to seek outside perspective during emotional difficulty is ancient, and in many cases, genuinely helpful. What matters most, many mental health professionals suggest, is choosing guidance that supports genuine well-being, rather than reinforcing unhealthy patterns or false urgency. Tonight, no coaching session is needed, no advice to seek out. Just this steady, unhurried rest, entirely available to you right now, free of any cost at all. On one of the internet's largest discussion forums, a single community dedicated specifically to twin flame experiences has grown to include hundreds of thousands of members, each one joining voluntarily to share, ask questions, or simply read others' stories. To place that number in perspective, imagine a large university campus, one that might typically house around 20,000 students across its dormitories and lecture halls. This single online community holds more than 10 times that many members, all gathered around one shared specific topic. Inside these spaces, conversations range widely from people describing recent painful separations to others celebrating what they consider long-awaited reunions, to newer members simply asking how to recognize whether what they're feeling counts as a genuine twin flame connection at all. Moderators of large spiritual communities like this one often note a recurring pattern: members frequently arrive during particularly difficult emotional periods, seeking not just information, but genuine emotional support from others who won't dismiss or minimize what they're going through. That function offering belonging during difficult stretches of life may matter just as much as any specific belief being discussed within the community itself. Human beings have always gathered in groups during uncertain times, whether around ancient fires, religious congregations, or now quietly through late-night forum posts typed from a phone in bed. The platform has changed dramatically across centuries. The underlying need for company during difficulty has not changed at all. Wherever you find your own sense of belonging, whether in person or online, it matters. Let that quiet sense of shared humanity settle over you now gently, as sleep continues to draw closer. If you were to search for twin flame astrology readings right now, you'd find hundreds of dedicated websites, each offering personalized readings meant to reveal information about a person's twin flame connection based on birth chart details. These services typically ask for a birth date, time, and location, then generate a report claiming to describe compatibility timing or challenges related to a person's twin flame journey. Some offer these reports through automated systems, generating instant results from a template. Others employ individual astrologers who review each chart personally before writing a more customized reading. Pricing across these hundreds of sites varies enormously, from readings offered for free as an introductory offer, up to more elaborate paid reports costing significant sums for detailed, personalized analysis. The sheer number of competing websites in this specific niche tells its own story about market demand, since a service industry generally only grows this crowded when genuine sustained interest supports it. It's worth restating clearly and gently that astrology itself remains scientifically unverified as a predictive system, however ancient and culturally significant its traditions may be. That said, the appeal of these services likely extends beyond literal belief in their predictive accuracy. Many people describe using astrology readings less as fact and more as a structured space for reflection, a prompt that helps them think more clearly about their own relationships and desires. There's real value in that kind of structured reflection, even without any genuine predictive power behind the chart itself. Whatever helps you reflect honestly on your own life carries worth, astrology or otherwise. Rest easy tonight, no reading required. Podcasting has become another major channel for twin flame content, with hundreds of shows now dedicated entirely to the topic, releasing new episodes on a regular ongoing schedule. Some podcasts focus on interviews featuring guests who share their own personal twin flame stories in extended, detailed conversations. Others take a more educational approach, breaking down specific concepts, stages or signs associated with twin flame belief, episode by episode. A smaller number blend the two, mixing personal storytelling with broader spiritual teaching drawn from the host's own background and training. Podcast listenership data across spiritual and relationship categories shows consistent, steady audience growth over the past several years, with twin flame-focused shows representing a small but notably devoted niche within that broader category. Devoted in this context means something specific. Listeners of niche spiritual podcasts tend to show unusually high completion rates, finishing entire episodes rather than abandoning them partway through a pattern. Podcast analysts often associate with content that feels personally, emotionally relevant to the listener's own life circumstances. That pattern suggests these shows aren't simply providing passive background noise. Listeners are actively engaged, often processing their own experiences alongside whatever story or teaching the episode offers that day. Audio as a medium carries a particular intimacy that text alone often lacks. A voice speaking directly into someone's ears, often through headphones, often during quiet, private moments, like a commute or a walk. That same intimate quality is part of why you might be listening to a voice like this one right now, late at night, letting words settle gently around you as your own mind begins to quiet. Beyond books, coaching, and digital content, twin flame belief has also spawned a tangible physical marketplace filled with jewelry, journals, and ritual candles, designed specifically around the concept. Matching jewelry sets, often sold in pairs meant to represent two connected souls, have become particularly popular, allowing believers to wear a physical symbol of their twin flame connection, even during periods of separation. Specialized journals guide users through structured reflection exercises, prompting them to track dreams, synchronicities, or emotional patterns they associate with their twin flame journey over time. Ritual candles, often marketed with specific colors or scents, believed to support twin flame reunion or healing, represent another steady seller within this niche market. Small business owners and independent crafters have found genuine sustainable income, creating these products often through online marketplaces that connect niche spiritual sellers directly with interested buyers worldwide. This kind of tangible product ecosystem tends to form around beliefs with real staying power, since physical goods require sustained demand to remain profitable over time, unlike a passing trend that might fade within a single season. There's something worth noticing in how physical hands-on objects like these function for people navigating difficult emotions. A journal page filled out slowly by hand, a candle lit deliberately before bed, these physical rituals can offer real grounding and comfort, regardless of the specific belief system attached to them. Human beings have always used tangible objects and small rituals to process big, intangible feelings. Tonight, your own ritual might be simpler still. Just the quiet act of lying still, breathing slowly, letting the day finally gently close. Individual coaching sessions, specifically focused on twin flame relationships, can carry a notable price tag, with some experienced coaches charging several $100s for a single extended session. Higher pricing in this space is often tied to a coach's specific credentials, years of practice, or a strong personal following built through books, podcasts, or social media content over time. A single 90-minute session with a well-established twin flame coach might cost as much as a modest monthly grocery bill for one person, an investment some clients describe as absolutely worth it during a period of confusion or heartbreak, and others later describe with more complicated feelings. Consumer spending researchers who study the broader wellness and spiritual services market note that people are often willing to spend significantly more during periods of acute emotional distress than during calmer, more settled times in Zen. Their lives a pattern that holds true across many types of services, not just twin flame coaching specifically. This raises a reasonable, gentle question worth sitting with, not as judgment, but as honest reflection. What is it exactly that people are paying for in these moments? Often, it seems to be less about the specific twin flame framework itself, and more about the simple experience of being heard closely without interruption by someone who takes their pain seriously during a genuinely difficult stretch of life. That kind of attentive listening carries real value, whatever label happens to be attached to the session. You don't need to pay for that kind of attention tonight. This quiet moment, just you and this unhurried voice, is already offering exactly that. What began primarily as an English language phenomenon within Western New Age spirituality has over the past 2 decades spread into dozens of other languages, with dedicated twin flame communities now active in Spanish, Portuguese, French, German, Russian, Japanese, and many other tongues. Translation in this case hasn't simply meant converting the same content word for word into a different language. Each linguistic community has in its own way reshaped twin flame belief, slightly blending it with existing local spiritual traditions and folk beliefs already familiar to that culture. A Spanish language twin flame community, for instance, might weave in elements of Catholic mysticism already deeply present throughout much of Latin American spiritual life, while a Japanese language community might draw connections to older Shinto or Buddhist concepts of fate and connection. This pattern of an idea traveling internationally and adapting to fit local spiritual frameworks is actually quite common throughout religious and spiritual history. Rarely does a concept move across cultures completely unchanged. Linguists and cultural researchers who study the global spread of spiritual movements note that this kind of adaptive blending often signals genuine cultural staying power rather than a passing trend confined to one specific country or audience. In other words, twin flame belief hasn't simply been exported wholesale from one culture to the rest of the world. It's been actively reshaped again and again by each new community that adopts it, becoming something a little different in every language it touches. There's something worth appreciating in that, the reminder that longing for deep connection takes many different shapes depending on where and to whom it belongs. Let your own thoughts settle now in whatever language feels most like home to you tonight. Within larger social media platforms built around groups and communities, specific twin flame focused groups have grown to include tens of thousands of active members each, some even surpassing that number considerably. These groups function somewhat differently from open public content, since membership is often required before someone can view or participate in discussions, creating a more private, closer-knit space than a public post or video might offer. Inside these groups, conversation tends to move quickly, with members posting daily updates about their own personal experiences, asking for input from others who've supposedly gone through similar stages, and offering encouragement during particularly difficult emotional periods. Group administrators, often experienced members or informal community leaders themselves, sometimes establish detailed rules around what kind of content is welcome. occasionally discouraging posts that seem to promote unhealthy attachment or repeated contact with an ex-partner under the twin flame framework. This kind of internal self-regulation is worth noting, since it suggests many community members are genuinely aware of the potential for this belief system to reinforce painful patterns and are actively working within their own spaces to guard against that risk. Community researchers studying online support groups more broadly note that tightly knit private groups like these often provide members with a stronger, more consistent sense of belonging compared to open public platforms, precisely because of their smaller, more contained size. Belonging, in the end, may be the real thread running underneath much of this activity, a very human need for company during uncertain chapters of life. You don't need any group tonight to feel that same steadying presence. This quiet space right here is enough. Across every major video platform combined, cumulative views on twin flame-related content now reach into the billions, a number so large that it becomes almost meaningless without some kind of grounding comparison. Consider this instead. If every single view represented 1 second of someone's undivided attention, that combined total would add up to well over 100 years of continuous, uninterrupted watching spread across millions of separate individual viewers, rather than any single person. Behind that staggering figure sits an enormous ongoing river of human attention flowing steadily toward this one particular topic, day after day across years. Content creators working within this space have described a consistent pattern. Videos framed around personal signs, symptoms, or stages tend to perform especially well, likely because viewers are actively searching for validation of their own private experiences, rather than passive general information. This suggests something worth sitting with gently. People aren't necessarily watching out of idle curiosity about a distant topic. Many are watching because they're hoping to see their own private, sometimes confusing feelings reflected back at them, clearly described by someone else who seems to understand. That hope to feel understood by someone, even a stranger speaking through a screen, is a deeply human one, and it doesn't require any particular belief in twin flames themselves to make sense. You've likely searched for that same kind of understanding yourself at some point, hoping someone else's words might explain something you couldn't quite articulate on your own. Right now, in this quiet space, you don't need to search any further. Just let yourself be here fully, without needing anything more explained. Twin flame belief has grown substantial enough to support entire dedicated conferences and multi-day retreats, held in locations across several continents, drawing attendees who travel significant distances specifically to participate. These gatherings typically combine structured workshops, guest speakers, with established followings in the twin flame community, and smaller group sessions designed to help attendees process their own personal experiences alongside others navigating similar questions. Some retreats take place in notably scenic, quiet locations, mountain retreats or coastal settings, chosen deliberately to support reflection and emotional processing, away from the noise and distraction of everyday life. Attendance at these events can range from smaller gatherings of a few dozen people, up to larger conferences drawing several hundred attendees across a single weekend. Event organizers in the broader spiritual retreat industry note steady, consistent growth in this specific niche over the past decade, mirroring similar growth across wellness retreats more broadly during the same period. What's notable here isn't simply that people believe in twin flames, but that a meaningful number are willing to invest real-time money and travel specifically to gather with others who share the belief-seeking connection with a wider community, rather than processing the experience entirely alone. That impulse gathering physically with others around a shared question or belief is ancient, echoing much older traditions of pilgrimage and communal spiritual gathering practiced across countless cultures throughout history. The specific destination and theme may be new, but the underlying human instinct to travel towards shared meaning is remarkably old. Tonight, no travel is needed. Wherever you are right now is quite simply exactly the right place to rest. Twin flame belief, once concentrated primarily within specific pockets of Western spiritual culture, now maintains active, engaged communities across 6 inhabited continents spanning North America, South America, Europe, Africa, Asia, Australia. This kind of geographic spread is worth pausing on, because it means the underlying appeal of the concept has proven flexible enough to resonate meaningfully across an enormous range of different cultural, religious, and social contexts. A community discussing twin flames in Nairobi looks quite different culturally and socially from one gathering in Seoul or Buenos Aires. Yet each has found its own way to adopt and adapt the core concept to fit local spiritual language and existing beliefs already present in that region. Researchers studying the global spread of modern spiritual movements often point to this kind of wide geographic distribution as a meaningful signal, suggesting an idea taps into something closer to a universal human experience, rather than a narrow cultural quirk specific to one particular region or background. That doesn't necessarily validate any of the specific metaphysical claims twin flame belief makes about souls, frequencies, or cosmic destiny. It does suggest quite clearly that the underlying emotional experience the concept attempts to describe, intense connection, longing, recognition, resonates with something recognizably human across an enormously wide range of cultural backgrounds. Wherever you happen to be listening from tonight, on whichever continent, in whichever language you first learned to describe your own feelings, that same underlying longing for deep connection likely lives somewhere inside you too. It's one of the most universally shared human experiences there is. Let that quiet shared thread settle around you now, connecting you gently to countless others drifting towards sleep at this very same hour. Within the broader tarot card market, a growing selection of decks designed specifically around twin flame themes has become one of the best performing categories among newer spiritual product releases. These specialized decks replace or supplement traditional tarot imagery with cards specifically illustrating twin flame concepts, stages of separation, moments of recognition, symbolic reunion, alongside more conventional tarot card meanings adapted to fit the framework. Publishers and independent card designers working in this space report that twin flame themed decks frequently sell out quickly upon release, often requiring additional printing runs to meet ongoing demand from eager buyers. Tarot itself carries a long, genuinely fascinating history. Originating in 15th century Italy, initially as a card game, before gradually being adopted for divination purposes centuries later, primarily beginning in the 18th century. It's worth being clear that tarot reading has never been scientifically validated as a genuine predictive tool, and most contemporary tarot practitioners themselves increasingly describe the practice less as literal fortune-telling and more as a structured method for personal reflection and intuitive thinking. Approached this way, a twin flame tarot deck functions less like a crystal ball and more like a very specific, beautifully illustrated journaling prompt, offering symbolic imagery that helps someone slow down and articulate feelings that might otherwise remain vague or unspoken. In that kind of structured reflection carries genuine value regardless of whether the cards hold any actual predictive power. Sometimes the simple act of pausing to consider a symbolic image is enough to reveal something you already knew quietly somewhere inside yourself. No cards are needed tonight. Just this pause is enough. Beyond non-fiction guides and spiritual teaching books, an entire wing of independently published fiction has emerged, specifically around twin flame themes, with self-published romance novels built around the concept now numbering in the thousands. Independent publishing platforms have made it dramatically easier over the past decade for individual authors to write format and release novels without needing traditional publishing house approval, and twin flame romance has become a genuinely popular subgenre within that broader independent romance market. These novels typically follow familiar structural beats, an instant, undeniable connection between two characters, a period of painful separation or misunderstanding, and an eventual, often dramatic reunion, closely mirroring the same narrative arc described within twin flame belief itself. Romance publishing analysts note that subgenres built around strong, clearly defined emotional templates like this one tend to perform particularly well within self-publishing markets, since readers actively seeking that specific emotional experience can easily search for and find exactly what they're looking for using targeted keywords. This creates something of a feedback loop worth noticing. Popular twin flame novels reinforce familiar story beats already circulating within twin flame belief more broadly, while real-life twin flame stories shared online sometimes echo dramatic structures readers first encountered within these very same novels. Fiction and belief in this specific case seem to shape each other continuously, each one drawing narrative inspiration from the other over time. There's nothing unusual in that pattern. Stories have always shaped how people interpret their own real experiences long before twin flame belief existed at all. Whatever story you might be quietly telling yourself tonight about your own life, let it soften now, gently, into rest. Structured online courses, specifically teaching twin flame concepts, now number in the hundreds, hosted across various educational platforms designed originally for a much broader range of subjects entirely unrelated to spirituality. These courses typically combine recorded video lessons, downloadable workbooks, and sometimes live group coaching calls, walking participants step by step through a structured understanding of twin flame stages, from initial recognition through separation and eventual reunion. Course pricing varies considerably, from more accessible options priced under $50 up to comprehensive multi-month programs costing several $100s, often bundled together with additional one-on-one coaching sessions as part of the total package. Online education researchers, studying course completion rates across different subject categories, note that spiritual and personal development courses, twin flame-focused programs included, tend to show notably higher engagement rates during the early lessons compared to many other course categories, though completion often drops off considerably by the final modules, a pattern common across most self-paced online learning, generally not unique to this particular topic. This structured educational approach reflects something meaningful about how twin flame belief has evolved over time, moving well beyond loosely shared personal stories and towards something resembling formal curriculum, complete with defined lessons, homework assignments, and measurable progress markers. Whether or not the underlying concept itself holds up to scientific scrutiny, the desire driving people toward these courses, wanting clearer understanding of their own confusing emotional experiences, is entirely genuine and worth taking seriously. Structure in general tends to bring comfort during uncertain times, even outside any specific spiritual context. Tonight, no course or lesson awaits you, just this quiet, unstructured rest, freely given, exactly as it is. Individual content creators specializing in twin flame topics have in some cases built social media followings exceeding 1 million people each, a scale of reach comparable to some mainstream celebrities or established public figures in entirely different fields. These influencers typically built their following gradually over years, sharing personal twin flame stories, offering interpretive guidance to followers' questions, and steadily building trust through consistent, ongoing content across multiple platforms simultaneously. Reaching an audience of 1 million followers represents a genuinely significant achievement within any content niche, requiring not just an initial spark of interest, but sustained engagement across potentially thousands of individual posts and videos over an extended period of time. Social media researchers studying influencer growth patterns across different content categories note that spiritual and relationship-focused creators often build unusually strong parasocial bonds with their audiences, meaning followers frequently feel a genuine one-directional sense of closeness and trust toward the creator, despite having no real personal relationship with them at all. This kind of bond can be a genuine source of comfort for followers navigating difficult emotional periods, offering a consistent, familiar voice they can return to regularly. It can also, mental health professionals sometimes caution, create real risk if followers begin making significant personal or relationship decisions based primarily on a stranger's general content rather than their own specific circumstances and, when needed, qualified individual guidance. Influence of this scale carries real responsibility, whatever the specific subject matter happens to be. Tonight, no influencer's voice needs following, no advice needs applying. Just this one steady, familiar voice, speaking gently, guiding you quietly and simply toward rest. Meditation applications originally built around general mindfulness and sleep content have increasingly added specific twin flame-themed offerings. Guided meditations designed to help users connect with, heal from, or process feelings related to their twin flame journey. Combined across the various apps offering this kind of content, downloads number in the millions, suggesting this isn't a small addition tucked away in some obscure corner of app stores, but a genuinely popular category drawing consistent, ongoing user interest. These guided sessions typically walk listeners through visualization exercises, imagining a twin flame's presence, working through feelings of separation, or preparing emotionally for an eventual reunion, all delivered through the same calm, steady narration style, commonly used across general meditation content. It's worth noting something genuinely useful buried within this specific format, regardless of the twin flame framing attached to it. Guided meditation itself, as a practice, carries real, well-documented benefits for reducing anxiety and improving sleep quality. Benefits that exist independently of whatever specific spiritual belief happens to accompany a given session. In other words, someone listening to a twin flame-themed meditation before bed may genuinely experience calmer, more restful sleep, not necessarily because of any twin flame connection being addressed, but because slow breathing, calm narration, and guided relaxation reliably support the body's natural transition toward rest. The specific words used matter less in this sense than the steady rhythm and calming tone surrounding them. You're experiencing something similar yourself right now, this same slow, steady pacing designed specifically to help your own mind and body ease gradually toward sleep. Whatever brought you here tonight, let this rhythm do its quiet work. Zooming out from twin flame belief, specifically the broader New Age and metaphysical product market, which includes everything from crystals and tarot decks to astrology apps and spiritual coaching, generates revenue reaching well into the product, billions of dollars globally each year. To place that figure in perspective, imagine an entire industry, roughly comparable in scale to a well-established sector of the traditional economy, employing thousands of people worldwide across publishing, retail, coaching, event planning, and digital content creation. Twin flame belief represents just one thread within this much larger spiritual marketplace, sitting alongside crystal healing astrology, tarot, energy work, and countless other modern spiritual practices that have similarly grown from smaller countercultural movements into substantial organized industries over the past several decades. Market researchers tracking consumer spending in this space note consistent year-over-year growth throughout much of the past decade, with particularly notable acceleration during periods of broader social uncertainty, when interest in spiritual meaning-making tends to rise noticeably across many different demographics and age groups. This pattern makes intuitive sense when you consider it closely. Uncertain times naturally tend to increase people's hunger for frameworks that offer clarity, comfort, and a sense of larger meaning, whatever specific form that framework happens to take for each individual. Twin flame belief in this context isn't an isolated phenomenon so much as one visible expression of a much wider, very human pattern, reaching for meaning and structure during difficult or uncertain chapters of life. That reaching, in whatever form it takes for you personally, deserves gentleness rather than judgment. Tonight, let your own reaching rest quietly too, needing nothing more than this simple, unhurried pause. Now gently let's turn a corner together, moving away from the scale and spread of twin flame belief, and towards something a little closer to home, the actual psychology quietly underneath it all. Many psychologists studying this phenomenon connect twin flame belief directly to attachment theory, a well-established framework in psychology, describing how early relationships with caregivers shape the way people connect with others throughout their entire lives. Attachment theory first developed by psychologist John Bowlby in the mid-20th century, and later expanded significantly by researcher Mary Ainsworth, identifies several distinct attachment styles people tend to carry into adult relationships, shaped largely by early childhood experiences of closeness, safety, and responsiveness from caregivers. These patterns, formed long before conscious memory even begins, quietly influence how safe or anxious a person feels within closeness as an adult, sometimes in ways they've never consciously examined. When someone experiences an unusually intense, immediate connection with a new person, psychologists suggest that intensity often has less to do with cosmic fate and more to do with old, familiar attachment patterns being activated, patterns formed decades earlier and carried quietly ever since. This doesn't diminish the reality of the feeling. If anything, it deepens it, because it means the intensity you might feel toward someone is connected to something genuinely important, your own deep, lifelong need for safety and closeness, rather than something disconnected from you entirely. You carry your own particular attachment history, shaped by your own particular life, whether or not you've ever examined it closely. That history lives quietly within you, even now, as your body continues settling gently toward rest, safe and steady exactly where you are. There's a particular stage of early romantic connection, well documented across decades of psychological research, where intense infatuation can feel remarkably similar to what twin flame belief describes as fated recognition. This early stage, sometimes simply called the honeymoon phase, involves genuinely heightened emotional and physical responses, increased attention toward the new person, difficulty concentrating on other things, and a strong pull to spend as much time together as possible. Researchers studying early romantic attachment have found this heightened state typically peaks within the first few months of a new connection, gradually settling into calmer, steadier patterns as the relationship, if it continues, moves into a more established stage. During this early peak, judgment about compatibility and long-term suitability can become genuinely clouded, not because anything mystical is occurring, but because the brain's attention and reward systems are simply working in overdrive, prioritizing the new connection above almost everything else, temporarily. This is precisely the window where twin flame framing tends to feel most convincing, because the felt intensity really is remarkable, even without any cosmic explanation required to account for it. Recognizing this pattern doesn't mean dismissing how powerful early connection can genuinely feel. It simply offers a gentler, more grounded explanation, rooted in well-understood brain chemistry rather than fate, for why those first months with someone new can feel so uniquely, overwhelmingly intense. Understanding this pattern in yourself, should you ever notice it again, might offer a small measure of steadiness during an otherwise disorienting time. For now, though, there's no new connection to analyze, no early stage to navigate. Just this familiar, steady quiet, gently holding you exactly as you are tonight. Neuroscience research into early romantic attachment reveals a strikingly consistent pattern across nearly every study on the subject, involving measurable real changes in brain activity and chemistry during the earliest stages of falling for someone new. Brain imaging studies conducted during this period consistently show heightened activity in regions associated with reward and motivation, alongside notable changes in neurotransmitter levels that closely resemble patterns typically seen in states of intense focus or even mild compulsion. This isn't speculation or metaphor. It's measurable, observable brain activity documented repeatedly across controlled research settings using real imaging technology. What's genuinely striking is how closely these documented neurological changes match many of the sensations twin flame stories describe. Qualitatively, the overwhelming pull toward one specific person, difficulty focusing on anything else, an almost obsessive quality to early thoughts about someone new. Neuroscientists studying this phenomenon suggest the felt experience twin flame believers describe may be quite literally real brain chemistry, just interpreted through a spiritual and cosmic framework rather than a neurological one. Both explanations, in a sense, are describing the same underlying human experience from two entirely different vantage points, one reaching toward destiny and cosmic connection, the other reaching toward observable biology and evolved reward systems. Neither vantage point necessarily needs to fully replace the other for the underlying experience itself to remain valid and real. What matters most, perhaps, is recognizing that this intense internal experience, whatever name you give it, is a genuinely powerful, entirely real part of human connection, worth taking seriously without needing a cosmic explanation to justify how strongly you might have once felt it. Among the specific neurochemicals involved in early romantic attachment, dopamine plays a particularly central role, a neurotransmitter closely associated with motivation, reward, and pleasure across many different human experiences, not just romantic connection specifically. During the earlier stages of a new romantic interest, dopamine levels rise measurably, creating that unmistakable rush of excitement and anticipation so often described in early relationship stories. This same neurotransmitter system, notably, is also heavily involved in other experiences entirely unrelated to romance, including the pleasure derived from delicious food, satisfying achievement, and even certain addictive behaviors, which helps explain why early romantic infatuation can sometimes feel genuinely difficult to think clearly around, similar, in some ways, to other dopamine-driven experiences. When dopamine surges this dramatically in response to a specific person, it's entirely understandable why that experience might feel like more than ordinary attraction. It can genuinely feel like fate, like undeniable proof that something larger and more significant is unfolding, precisely because the internal sensation is so powerful and unusual compared to everyday emotional experience. Understanding the biological mechanism behind that sensation doesn't make the feeling itself any less real or meaningful in the moment it's happening. It simply offers a different lens for understanding why it feels so powerful, rooted in brain chemistry that every single human being carries, rather than something reserved specifically for one uniquely fated match. Your own brain right now is capable of that same remarkable chemistry alongside countless other, quieter, gentler chemical processes, including the ones currently helping you relax, breathe more slowly, and drift steadily closer towards sleep. One particularly fascinating area of neuroscience research involves mirror neurons, specialized brain cells, that activate both when a person performs an action themselves and when they simply observe someone else performing that same action. Discovered initially through research on primates, during the 1990s, mirror neurons are now understood to play a meaningful role in human empathy, allowing people to somewhat directly, neurologically, resonate with another person's emotional state, simply by observing their expressions, tone, and body language closely. Some researchers studying social connection suggest this mirror neuron system may help explain why certain new connections can feel remarkably fast and deep, almost instantaneous, particularly when two people happen to share unusually similar emotional expressiveness or communication styles. If your own mirror neuron system responds unusually strongly to a specific new person's expressions and cues that could genuinely produce a felt sense of rapid, deep understanding, even after a relatively brief initial interaction together. It's important to note that mirror neuron research remains an active, evolving area of neuroscience, and scientists continue refining exactly how significant this system's role truly is in complex human experiences like romantic connection specifically. Still, the existing research offers a genuinely compelling, biologically grounded possibility for why some connections do seem to unfold unusually quickly compared to others. Feeling deeply, rapidly understood by someone new doesn't require any cosmic explanation to make sense. Your own remarkable, ordinary human brain may simply be doing exactly what it evolved to do, reading another person's cues closely and resonating with them in return quietly, efficiently, the same way it's helping you unwind right now, reading these words and settling gradually toward rest. Within twin flame belief, a specific relational pattern comes up again and again across countless personal stories, commonly described as the runner and chaser dynamic. In this pattern, one partner, the runner, tends to pull away emotionally or physically whenever the relationship's intensity feels overwhelming, while the other partner, the chaser, responds by pursuing more closely, seeking reassurance and closeness, even as the runner continues withdrawing further. Twin flame teachings often frame this painful push and pull as a necessary, even sacred stage of the overall twin flame journey, something both partners must move through before eventual harmonious reunion becomes possible. It's worth pausing here gently, but honestly. This specific dynamic, taken purely on its own relational terms, closely resembles patterns already well documented within relationship psychology, entirely separate from any twin flame framework. A cycle where one partner withdraws and another pursues more intensely in response tends to create a self-reinforcing loop, where withdrawal increases pursuit, and increased pursuit often increases further withdrawal, regardless of any spiritual explanation layered on top of it. Relationship researchers studying this general pattern across many different couples note it frequently correlates with real emotional distress for both partners involved rather than representing a healthy, sustainable form of closeness. Over time, framing this particular pattern as a necessary spiritual stage, some therapists gently caution, can sometimes make it harder for someone to recognize when a relationship dynamic has become genuinely painful rather than simply meaningful and destined. This isn't about dismissing anyone's real experience within such a dynamic. It's about offering gently a clearer lens for understanding what might actually be happening underneath the story. Tonight, whatever patterns you may be quietly carrying, let them simply rest, unexamined and unhurried for now. Returning to attachment theory for a moment, the runner and chaser dynamic, described within twin flame belief maps closely onto patterns, researchers have already studied extensively under a different name: the interplay between anxious, avoidant attachment styles. Someone with a more anxious attachment style, shaped often by inconsistent caregiving during childhood, tends to seek reassurance actively when a relationship feels uncertain, sometimes increasing pursuit precisely when a partner seems to be pulling away. Someone with a more avoidant attachment style, often shaped by caregiving that felt distant or emotionally unavailable, tends to respond to relational intensity by creating space and distance, particularly when emotional closeness starts to feel overwhelming. When these two attachment styles pair together in a relationship, researchers have found the resulting dynamic can become a genuinely self-perpetuating cycle. Each partner's coping response inadvertently intensifying the very behavior that troubles them most in the other. This isn't a spiritual stage requiring cosmic patience to move through. It's a well-documented relational pattern, one that couples therapists work with regularly, often helping each partner recognize their own attachment style and how it shapes their reactions during moments of relational stress. Recognizing this pattern for what it is rather than a fated spiritual test can actually open up more practical, grounded paths toward healthier connection, whether within an existing relationship or in future ones. None of this requires judgment toward anyone who has experienced this particular cycle themselves, since attachment patterns form early, largely outside conscious choice or control. It simply means understanding is available, gentle, and grounded. Whenever someone feels ready to look closely at their own patterns, tonight, no pattern needs untangling. Just rest steady and unhurried exactly as you are. A number of licensed therapists working with clients navigating difficult relationships have raised a specific gentle concern about twin flame belief, namely that its framing can sometimes make it harder for someone to leave a relationship that has become genuinely painful or unhealthy. Because twin flame belief frames a specific connection as singular and fated, tied to one particular person, rather than open to other possible healthy partnerships. Some clients describe feeling reluctant to end even a clearly difficult relationship, worried they might be walking away from their one true destined match. Therapists have noted this concern arising particularly often in cases involving inconsistent or emotionally unpredictable partners, where the twin flame framework's expectation of painful separation, followed by eventual reunion, can unintentionally encourage someone to endure repeated cycles of hurt, waiting hopefully for a resolution the framework promises will eventually arrive. This is offered here not as blanket criticism of anyone who holds this belief, since many people navigate it thoughtfully and without harm, but as an honest, grounded observation some mental health professionals have shared based on real patterns they've witnessed in clinical practice. Healthy relationships, according to well-established relationship research spanning decades of study, generally involve mutual respect, consistency, and emotional safety for both partners involved, regardless of whether a relationship is framed as fated or simply chosen. If any relationship, twin flame labeled or otherwise, consistently causes more pain than genuine safety and closeness, most therapists would gently encourage looking honestly at that pattern, regardless of any spiritual narrative attached to your own well-being always matters. Whatever story explains a particular connection, tonight, wherever you are in your own relationships, may you feel genuinely safe, resting fully without needing anything explained away. Trauma bonding is a term used within psychology to describe a specific kind of intense attachment that can form between people during a relationship marked by cycles of difficulty, followed by relief, cycles of tension, followed by reconciliation that paradoxically strengthen emotional attachment, rather than weaken it over time. Researchers studying this pattern have found that unpredictable, alternating experiences of hurt and comfort within a relationship can create unusually strong emotional bonds, sometimes stronger counterintuitively than bonds formed through steady, consistent kindness alone. Some psychologists studying twin flame belief have noted troubling overlap between trauma bonding and certain twin flame relationships described online, particularly those involving repeated cycles of intense reconciliation following painful separation, a pattern the twin flame framework often interprets as spiritually meaningful rather than potentially concerning. This observation is offered carefully and without judgment toward anyone experiencing this pattern themselves. Since trauma bonds form through genuine neurological and emotional processes, not through any personal failing or lack of awareness. Understanding this overlap can offer real clarity, though, for anyone who recognizes elements of their own relationship within this description. A bond feeling extremely intense doesn't automatically mean that bond is healthy or sustainable, since intensity itself can arise from several very different underlying sources, some genuinely positive, others rooted in cycles of difficulty and relief that keep two people locked in an unstable, sometimes painful pattern. If any of this resonates with your own experience, that recognition itself, gentle and honest, can be a meaningful, quiet first step toward greater clarity. Tonight, though, is simply for rest, not for untangling anything difficult. Let your body soften fully now, safe and steady, right where you are. Long-term relationship research, drawing on decades of careful study involving thousands of couples, consistently describes healthy partnerships in ways that look quite different from the dramatic, intensity-driven narrative typically found within twin flame belief, where twin flame stories often emphasize overwhelming instant recognition, turbulent separation, and dramatic reunion. Relationship researchers, instead, consistently find that genuinely healthy, long-lasting partnerships tend to be built through steadier, quieter qualities: consistent kindness, clear communication, mutual respect during disagreement, gradual, patient trust building over extended time. Together. Psychologist John Gottman, whose research following married couples over several decades remains among the most well-regarded in the entire field, identified specific, measurable behaviors that reliably predict relationship stability and satisfaction behaviors, centered around small, everyday moments of connection and respect, rather than singular, dramatic peaks of intensity. This doesn't mean healthy relationships lack passion or deep feeling entirely. It means that lasting closeness, according to substantial research evidence, tends to be built gradually and maintained consistently, rather than arriving instantly through fate and surviving primarily through dramatic cycles of separation and reunion. Twin flame narratives. By centering intensity and turbulence as signs of a relationship's specialness, may inadvertently set an unrealistic template against which calmer, steadier partnerships can seem unfairly less significant or meaningful. By state comparison, a relationship doesn't need to feel like fate to be genuinely good for you. Sometimes quite the opposite is true. Calm, steady, undramatic closeness may actually be one of the clearest signs a relationship is healthy and safe. Wherever you find that kind of calm in your own life, whether in love or friendship, let it be honored fully tonight, without needing any drama to prove its worth. Oxytocin, sometimes informally called the bonding hormone, plays a well-documented significant role in human connection, released during moments of physical closeness, trust building, and notably during unexpectedly warm or affirming social interactions, even brief ones with someone entirely new. Research measuring oxytocin levels during social bonding has found that even relatively small moments, sustained eye contact, an unusually warm conversation, feeling genuinely listened to by someone new, can trigger measurable increases in night. This hormone contributing directly to that felt sense of closeness and trust some people describe experiencing almost instantly with a new person. This biological response offers a grounded explanation for why an early conversation with someone new can sometimes feel disproportionately significant, warm and memorable, compared to countless other more forgettable interactions throughout an ordinary day. Your own body is fully capable of this response quietly, without requiring any cosmic explanation to justify it. It's simply part of how human connection works, biologically, an evolved system that rewards social bonding, because throughout much of human history, close social bonds meaningfully increase chances of survival and support within a wider community. Understanding this doesn't diminish how meaningful a specific connection might feel to you personally. It simply offers a gentler, more grounded lens for understanding why certain interactions carry such unexpected emotional weight, rooted in real measurable biology present in every single person, not reserved specifically for one uniquely fated encounter. Oxytocin, notably, is also released through far gentler, quieter means. Warm physical comfort, a calming voice, the settled feeling of finally, safely relaxing at the end of a long day. That same steady chemical process may be quietly at work in you right now, as your body continues easing gradually toward rest. Among the recurring details found across countless twin flame stories shared online, physical distance appears remarkably, often two people, separated by considerable geography, sometimes across entire countries or continents, who nonetheless describe feeling an unusually strong, persistent connection to one another. This pattern is worth examining a little more closely, because distance itself may actually contribute to, rather than simply accompany, that felt sense of intensity many describe. Psychological research on long-distance relationships has found an interesting, somewhat counterintuitive pattern. Couples separated by distance sometimes report higher relationship satisfaction during the separation period itself, compared to couples who see each other constantly, likely because limited contact naturally encourages more intentional, focused communication during the time they do share together. Distance also tends to limit exposure to a partner's more mundane, everyday qualities. The small frustrations and ordinary friction that naturally accumulate through shared daily life, allowing a partner instead to remain somewhat idealized in imagination during long stretches of separation. This idealization isn't necessarily dishonest or intentional. It's simply a natural, well-documented effect of limited information, where imagination quietly fills in gaps left by distance, often filling them with especially positive, romanticized qualities, rather than balanced, realistic ones. None of this means long-distance connections aren't real or meaningful, since many long-distance relationships genuinely do develop into lasting, healthy partnerships over time. It simply offers a grounded explanation for why distance and longing so frequently appear together within twin flame stories, specifically tied closely to well-studied patterns in how imagination and idealization naturally function under conditions of limited contact. Wherever you are tonight, near to those you love or far away from them, that same steady longing for connection lives quietly in you too. Separation holds a particularly central place within twin flame belief, often described not as an unfortunate interruption, but as a necessary, even essential stage of the overall journey, one both people are expected to move through before any eventual reunion becomes possible. These separation periods, as described across countless personal accounts, can stretch on for months or even years, often marked by significant emotional pain, uncertainty, and a persistent, unresolved sense of connection to the absent other person, despite considerable physical or emotional distance between them. Psychologists studying grief and loss note some genuine overlap between how people describe this specific kind of prolonged separation and broader, well-documented patterns of ambiguous loss. A term describing grief that lacks clear resolution or closure, often because the person or relationship in question remains technically present or possible, rather than definitively completely ended. Ambiguous loss, first studied extensively by researcher Pauline Boss beginning in the 1970s, has been found to often carry unique psychological difficulty precisely because it resists the natural closure most grief processes eventually move toward. Without a clear ending, the mind sometimes struggles to fully process and integrate the loss, remaining instead in a suspended, unresolved emotional state that can persist far longer than grief, following a clearer, more definitive ending. This may help explain why separation periods described within twin flame belief so often carry such profound, lingering emotional weight, not because of any cosmic significance necessarily, but because ambiguous, unresolved separation is genuinely one of the more psychologically difficult experiences a person can move through. If you've ever carried that kind of unresolved ache yourself, know that its weight is real and well understood, even without any spiritual framework required to explain it. Let it rest a little lighter in you tonight. Following whatever period of painful separation, a twin flame narrative includes believers typically describe an eventual reunion phase, a point where both people finally come back together, often described as more stable, mature, harmonious than the earlier, more turbulent stages of the tant relationship. This reunion is generally framed as the culmination of significant personal growth undergone separately by each person during their time apart, healing old wounds, addressing personal patterns, and becoming in some sense more ready for genuine partnership than they were during the relationship's earlier, more chaotic stages. There's something genuinely worth appreciating within this particular part of the narrative, setting aside any question of cosmic destiny entirely. The idea that meaningful personal growth can occur during difficult periods of separation, and that healthier reconnection sometimes becomes possible only after that individual growth has taken place, aligns reasonably well with broader psychological understanding of how people do in fact sometimes grow through hardship and difficult transitions. Growth through difficulty is a well-established pattern across psychological research, generally extending well beyond romantic relationships, specifically into how people process and eventually integrate many different kinds of loss, challenge, and change throughout their lives. Whether or not a specific reunion actually occurs with a specific person, the underlying process this stage describes, growing through difficulty, gradually becoming steadier and more emotionally mature over time, remains genuinely valuable and real regardless of any particular relationship's eventual outcome. That growth belongs to you fully, whether or not any specific reunion ever follows it. You carry that capacity for quiet growth within you always, even now, in this simple, unhurried moment of rest. It's worth pausing here to notice something important, something easy to overlook amid all this talk of romantic destiny. That powerful sense of sudden, deep recognition, so often described in twin flame stories, isn't actually exclusive to romantic connection at all. Plenty of people describe meeting a new friend and feeling almost immediately an unusually strong sense of ease and familiarity, as though they'd known each other for years, despite having just met. Researchers studying friendship formation have found that certain shared qualities, similar humor, overlapping values, comparable communication styles, can accelerate that sense of closeness remarkably quickly, sometimes within a single, extended conversation. This matters because it suggests the underlying mechanism producing that startling sense of recognition isn't inherently romantic or cosmic in nature. It's simply what happens when two people, for whatever specific reason, resonate unusually well together, a pattern that can occur in friendship, in mentorship, even occasionally in brief encounters with a stranger who happens to share a striking amount in common with you. If you've ever experienced this kind of instant ease with a new friend, you already know firsthand that fast, deep-feeling recognition on its own doesn't require any singular cosmic explanation to make sense. It simply reflects how naturally connection can form when the right particular ingredients happen to align between two people. This doesn't diminish romantic experiences of the same feeling. It simply widens the frame a little, reminding you that this capacity for sudden warm recognition lives in you, more broadly available across many different kinds of relationships throughout your life, not reserved for one singular fated encounter alone. Déjà vu, that strange, fleeting sensation of having already experienced a moment that is in fact entirely new, appears frequently within twin flame stories, often described as further evidence supporting a fated connection between two people. Nearly all people experience déjà vu at some point in their lives. And researchers studying the phenomenon estimate it occurs at least occasionally for the significant majority of the general population, making it a remarkably common human experience rather than any kind of rare or unusual signal. Neuroscientists still don't fully understand every mechanism behind déjà vu, though several credible theories currently exist, including one suggesting a brief, minor mismatch or delay in how the brain processes and stores new sensory information, causing a new experience to briefly, mistakenly register as an old familiar memory. Another theory involves overlapping activity between different memory-related brain regions, momentarily blurring the distinction between something genuinely new and something previously experienced. What researchers do agree on, clearly, is that déjà vu occurs across all kinds of everyday situations, entirely unrelated to fated romantic connection. Walking into an unfamiliar room, hearing an ordinary conversation, visiting a new city for the very first time. Its frequent appearance within twin flame stories likely reflects more than anything how common this particular sensation genuinely is throughout ordinary human life, rather than any special connection to romantic destiny specifically. Experiencing déjà vu while meeting someone new doesn't necessarily mean anything cosmic is unfolding. It simply means your very ordinary, remarkable human brain briefly did what brains sometimes do, blurring the line between new and familiar for a passing curious moment, nothing more. Synchronicity refers to the experience of two or more events occurring together in a way that feels deeply meaningful, even though no clear causal connection links them together in any conventional logical sense. This isn't simply a New Age term invented recently. It's a concept with real documented roots in 20th century psychology, studied seriously by professionals working to understand why certain coincidences feel so profoundly significant to the people experiencing them, regardless of their actual statistical likelihood. Twin flame belief draws heavily on this concept framing: meaningful coincidences, repeated numbers, unexpected encounters, overlapping life details, as further evidence supporting a fated connection between two specific people. It's worth understanding synchronicity's actual psychological function a little more closely here. The experience of noticing meaningful coincidence tends to increase significantly during periods of heightened emotional attention, precisely the kind of attention a person naturally directs towards someone they already feel strongly drawn to for other, more ordinary reasons entirely. In other words, synchronicity often reflects where your attention is already focused, rather than functioning as independent external proof of anything supernatural occurring. This doesn't make the experience of synchronicity any less genuinely striking or emotionally powerful when it happens. It simply offers a grounded psychological explanation for why certain coincidences feel so significant, specifically around people or moments already carrying strong emotional weight for you. Coincidence and meaning aren't necessarily opposites in the end. Sometimes, meaning is something the human mind actively creates and layers onto ordinary events, a remarkable, entirely natural capacity worth appreciating in its own right, without necessarily requiring any deeper cosmic explanation underneath it. The concept of synchronicity itself traces back specifically to the work of Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung, who developed and wrote extensively about the idea beginning in the earlier decades of the 20th century, long before twin flame belief existed in anything resembling its current form. Jung described synchronicity as meaningful coincidence occurring without any direct causal connection, proposing it as a genuine psychological phenomenon worth serious study rather than mere random chance dismissed outright. Importantly, Jung's original framework was considerably broader than romantic connection, specifically exploring how meaningful coincidence might relate to dreams, the unconscious mind, and broader patterns of human psychological experience across many different life contexts entirely. When twin flame belief later adopted the language and concept of synchronicity decades after Jung's original work, it narrowed his considerably broader psychological framework specifically toward romantic destiny, applying his ideas to a much more specific, limited purpose than Jung himself had originally intended or explored in his own writing. This pattern of borrowing serious academic or psychological concepts and then reshaping them toward a much narrower, more specific spiritual purpose happens fairly often throughout the broader history of New Age spirituality, tracing legitimate psychological or scientific language back to more grounded, complex original sources. Understanding synchronicity's actual, more complete academic origin doesn't diminish how striking, meaningful coincidence can genuinely feel when it happens in your own life. It simply offers a fuller, richer picture of where that specific concept actually came from and how much broader its original intended scope truly was, before later movements gradually narrowed and reshaped it into something more specific over the following decades. Even old psychological ideas, it turns out, keep quietly evolving in the retelling. Human brains evolved over an extraordinarily long stretch of time to be remarkably efficient pattern detectors, a trait that likely offered genuine survival advantages throughout much of human evolutionary history, helping early humans quickly identify dangerous patterns like a predator's movement or a change in weather signaling potential threat ahead. This same powerful, deeply ingrained pattern-detecting instinct, however, doesn't simply switch off in situations where no meaningful pattern actually exists. Psychologists call this tendency apophenia, the natural human inclination to perceive meaningful patterns or connections within entirely random or unrelated information, a well-documented and thoroughly studied cognitive tendency present to varying degrees in every single human mind. This explains a great deal about why coincidences, repeated numbers, unexpected encounters, similar life details shared with a new person can feel so remarkably significant, even when statistically speaking, such coincidences occur far more often across ordinary daily life than most people realize or consciously notice. Your own mind is doing this constantly, quietly, searching for patterns and connections throughout your entire day, mostly without you ever noticing this process actively at work beneath conscious awareness. This isn't a flaw or weakness particular to certain people prone to spiritual belief. It's simply a fundamental, universal feature of how human cognition operates, shared equally by scientists, skeptics, and believers alike, all working with the exact same remarkably pattern-hungry brain structure. Recognizing this tendency in yourself doesn't require abandoning any sense of wonder or meaning about your own life's genuine coincidences. It simply offers a gentler, more grounded understanding of where that persistent, very human sense of pattern and meaning actually originates from. Confirmation bias describes a well-documented, extensively studied cognitive tendency where people naturally notice and remember information that confirms what they already believe, while simultaneously overlooking or quickly forgetting information that might otherwise contradict or complicate that same existing belief. This particular bias plays a significant, quiet role in how twin flame belief often deepens and strengthens over time for those who hold it. Once someone becomes convinced they've met their twin flame, their mind naturally begins noticing and more easily remembering moments that seem to confirm that specific belief. A meaningful glance, a striking coincidence, an emotionally significant conversation, while quietly overlooking countless more ordinary, unremarkable moments that don't particularly support the same narrative. Over time, this selective attention and selective memory can create an increasingly convincing internal case for the belief, even though the underlying pattern of evidence being gathered is fundamentally skewed from the very start by that same initial assumption. This cognitive tendency isn't unique to twin flame beliefs specifically. It shapes an enormous range of human beliefs and decisions across nearly every area of life. From political opinions to everyday assumptions people quietly hold about themselves and others around them. Recognizing confirmation bias at work doesn't mean dismissing every meaningful moment or genuine connection you've ever experienced with another person. It simply means holding your own certainty a little more loosely, staying gently curious rather than immediately convinced, particularly around experiences carrying significant emotional weight for you personally. Tonight, there's no belief you need to confirm or examine closely. Just this simple, quiet noticing is enough, gentle and unhurried exactly as it is. Let's return once more to those repeating numbers, 11, 11, and similar sequences so frequently reported within twin flame stories as meaningful signs. There's a well-documented psychological principle directly relevant here called the frequency illusion, or sometimes the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon, describing exactly how newly noticed information suddenly seems to appear everywhere once a person's attention becomes specifically primed to look for it. This effect isn't limited to spiritual numbers at all. People experience it constantly across ordinary daily life. Suddenly noticing a specific car model everywhere, right after considering buying one themselves. Or hearing an unfamiliar word repeatedly, right after learning its meaning for the very first time, despite that word having likely appeared around them just as frequently before, simply unnoticed. The clock on your wall, statistically speaking, displays 11:11 exactly twice every single day, regardless of whether anyone happens to be actively watching for it or not. Once someone becomes primed to notice that specific number following exposure to twin flame content discussing its supposed significance, their brain naturally begins flagging every appearance of it far more readily than before, while quietly ignoring the countless other numbers appearing around them, just as often throughout each day. This selective noticing creates a genuinely convincing subjective sense of unusual, meaningful frequency, even though statistically nothing about the actual occurrence rate has changed at all. Understanding this mechanism doesn't require dismissing every meaningful number or symbol that catches your attention throughout your life. It simply offers a gentler, clearer lens for understanding why certain numbers might suddenly seem to follow you quietly once your own attention has been drawn toward them. Psychological research into rapid intimacy has produced a genuinely remarkable, well-documented finding that a single structured conversation, even one held between two complete strangers who have never met before, can reliably produce a strong felt sense of closeness within a surprisingly short amount of time. This kind of rapid intimacy doesn't require any spiritual explanation or fated cosmic alignment between two particular people. It simply requires the right specific conditions: sustained attention, genuine vulnerability, and mutual reciprocal self-disclosure, exchanged gradually back and forth between two willing participants over the course of a focused conversation. Under these particular conditions, two strangers can move from complete unfamiliarity to a felt sense of genuine closeness remarkably quickly, sometimes within less than an hour of focused, intentional conversation together. This finding matters considerably here because it suggests that the powerful, sudden sense of connection so often attributed specifically to twin flame recognition can actually be recreated deliberately under carefully controlled conditions between essentially any two willing people, given the right specific structure and genuine mutual openness between them. That doesn't necessarily mean every deep sudden connection is identical or interchangeable, since countless individual factors genuinely do shape how any particular relationship eventually unfolds and develops over time. It does suggest, though, that rapid, powerful closeness itself isn't necessarily rare or singularly fated in the way twin flame belief often frames it. It's a replicable, well-studied human capacity available in some form to nearly everyone, given the right conditions and genuine willingness to be openly vulnerable with another person. That capacity for closeness lives quietly within you too, available and real, whether or not it's ever specifically activated again. During the earliest stages of romantic connection, a well-documented psychological process quietly takes place. One where a person naturally begins projecting idealized qualities onto a new partner, often filling in gaps of unfamiliarity with especially positive, sometimes exaggerated assumptions about who that person truly is beneath the surface. This process happens largely outside conscious awareness, meaning most people aren't deliberately choosing to idealize someone new. It simply occurs naturally, as part of how early attraction functions, the mind reaching eagerly toward hope and possibility, rather than settling immediately into a fully balanced, realistic picture of an entirely new person. Researchers studying this pattern describe it as a normal, common feature of early relationship formation, one that typically softens gradually over time as two people spend more consistent time together, naturally encountering each other's more ordinary, occasionally imperfect qualities alongside the initial, more idealized impression. Within twin flame belief specifically, this natural idealizing tendency can become woven directly into the larger fated narrative, with a partner's early idealized qualities interpreted not as a normal psychological stage, likely to shift over time, but as further confirmed evidence of a uniquely destined perfect match. This distinction matters because idealization that never gets tested against ordinary, everyday reality can create a somewhat fragile foundation for a relationship, one that may struggle considerably once the earlier idealized image inevitably meets a partner's more complete, complicated, entirely human reality. Recognizing this pattern in yourself, should you notice it again someday, doesn't diminish genuine excitement about someone new. It simply offers a grounded reminder that real lasting connection tends to deepen gradually through honest familiarity, rather than remaining fixed at that first idealized impression alone. Building further on that idealizing tendency, researchers studying romantic relationships have identified this specific stage clearly enough to give it formal, recognized names within psychological literature, sometimes called positive illusion or idealization bias, depending on the specific research framework being used. Interestingly, some longer-term relationship studies have found that a certain measured degree of ongoing positive illusion, seeing a partner slightly more favorably than perfectly objective reality might suggest, can actually correlate with great relationship satisfaction over time, so long as that idealization remains grounded enough not to completely ignore or dismiss a partner's genuine, real flaws and struggles. This creates a genuinely interesting, somewhat nuanced picture, rather than a simple story where idealization is purely harmful in every single instance. A small, gentle degree of positive bias towards someone you love may actually support long-term relationship well-being, while extreme, unchecked idealization that refuses any contact with a partner's actual, complete reality tends to create considerably more fragile, unstable foundations over time. Twin flame belief, by framing a partner as singularly, cosmically perfect and specifically fated, risks pushing that natural idealizing tendency toward its more extreme, less grounded end, potentially setting up unrealistic expectations that any real, ordinary human relationship will eventually struggle to fully sustain. This doesn't mean early excitement or idealization about someone new is inherently unhealthy or something to actively suppress. It simply means gentle balance matters, allowing genuine appreciation for someone new to coexist honestly alongside realistic awareness of their actual complete humanity, flaws included. Real love, research consistently suggests, tends to hold both these things together: admiration and honest reality, rather than only one or the other alone. Limerence describes a specific, well-studied psychological state, characterized by intense, often involuntary infatuation toward another person, typically accompanied by intrusive, near-constant thoughts about that person, craving for reciprocation, and heightened emotional sensitivity to even small signals of interest or disinterest coming from them. Several psychologists studying twin flame belief have drawn direct comparisons between the emotional experience it describes and this specific, already well-documented psychological state, suggesting the two may frequently overlap considerably, even though twin flame belief adds an additional cosmic, fated interpretation entirely absent from the original clinical concept of limerence itself. Limerence, notably, is not classified as a mental health disorder, but rather as a recognized intense variation of normal human romantic experience, one that many people encounter at some point in their lives, usually during a specific relationship or particular period of unrequited or uncertain romantic interest. What makes this comparison particularly useful is that limerence has been studied clinically for decades now, giving researchers a considerably clearer, more grounded picture of how this specific intense state typically develops, how long it generally persists, and how it usually resolves naturally over time. Information not similarly available within twin flame belief's own more mystical framework. Recognizing potential limerence within an intensely felt connection doesn't necessarily diminish how genuinely powerful that experience feels while it's actually happening. It simply offers additional, well-grounded context, a clearer map for understanding a state that, while intense, is also considerably more common and considerably better understood by researchers than twin flame belief's cosmic framing alone might initially suggest to someone caught up in the middle of experiencing it firsthand. The term limerence itself was coined specifically by psychologist Dorothy Tenove, who introduced the concept in her 1979 book, Examining the Psychology of Romantic Love and Intense Infatuation, in considerable depth. Tenove developed this specific term after conducting extensive interviews with individuals describing their own experiences of intense, sometimes overwhelming romantic infatuation, noticing clear, consistent patterns emerging repeatedly across many different individual accounts she gathered during her research. Her work identified several specific recurring characteristics common to this particular state, including persistent, intrusive thinking about the person in question, a strong fear of rejection, alongside an equally strong hope for reciprocation, and a marked tendency to focus intensely on even small ambiguous signals from the other person, often interpreting them with considerably more significance than a more neutral observer might reasonably assign to the exact same behavior. What's notable, looking back now, nearly 5 decades after her original research, is how closely many of Tenove's original observations continue to match descriptions still commonly found within contemporary twin flame stories today. Despite twin flame belief as a distinct, organized concept not yet fully existing in its current widespread form during the time of her original 1979 research, this suggests something worth sitting with quietly. The underlying emotional experience both concepts attempt to describe likely predates either specific term, considerably representing a genuinely recurring, well-documented pattern of intense human romantic experience that different eras and different frameworks have each tried in their own particular way to name, understand, and make sense of, using whatever language and concepts were available to them at that particular moment in time. One particularly grounding practical finding from research into limerence involves its typical natural timeline, with most documented cases showing this intense, infatuated state gradually fading on its own, somewhere between roughly 18 months and 3 years after it initially began, regardless of whether the underlying relationship itself continues, ends, or never even fully develops into anything mutual at all. This natural fading isn't necessarily a sign of the relationship's failure or the connection's insignificance. It reflects instead a well-documented, biologically grounded pattern in how intense early romantic states generally function within the human nervous system over time, gradually settling from that initial heightened, almost obsessive intensity into calmer, steadier patterns of attachment, assuming a relationship continues forward in some ongoing form at all. This natural timeline offers something genuinely useful and grounding for understanding many twin flame narratives, specifically since the framework itself rarely accounts for this well-documented natural fading. Instead, often interpreting any reduction in overwhelming intensity as evidence of trouble of a runner pulling away, or of the relationship somehow losing its supposedly fated significance altogether. Understanding that intense infatuation naturally, healthily settles over time, in essentially all romantic connections, regardless of how they began, can offer real, grounded reassurance to anyone who's noticed their own feelings towards someone shifting or calming gradually after an initially overwhelming start. That calming isn't necessarily loss. Often quite the opposite. It may simply represent an entirely normal, healthy transition toward a steadier, more sustainable kind of closeness. One considerably better suited to actually lasting over months and years, rather than remaining perpetually unsustainably intense, the way early infatuation naturally tends to feel. Given what research consistently shows about limerence and early romantic intensity naturally settling over time, it's worth noting something: the twin flame framework itself rarely, if ever, directly addresses the entirely normal, well-documented experience of intense feelings gradually calming as any relationship, healthy or otherwise, continues forward across months and years together. Because twin flame belief so often centers dramatic, sustained intensity as proof of a connection's cosmic significance, a natural, healthy calming of that same intensity can become misinterpreted within the framework, understood not as an expected positive developmental stage, but instead as a troubling sign that something has gone wrong, that a runner is pulling away, or that the relationship's fated specialness is somehow fading or being lost entirely. This particular gap in the twin flame narrative may create unnecessary anxiety for people experiencing an entirely typical healthy relationship progression, worrying unnecessarily about a natural, expected shift that relationship researchers would actually recognize as a genuinely positive developmental sign, rather than any cause for real concern. Healthy relationships, according to extensive research spanning many decades, generally do become calmer and steadier over time. Without this natural settling, meaning the relationship has become any less meaningful or significant to either partner involved. If anything, that eventual settling often marks the beginning of a relationship's most stable, sustainable, and genuinely trustworthy phase, the point where two people move past initial infatuation into something calmer, steadier, and considerably more durable over the longer term. If your own experience of connection with someone has ever calmed gently over time, that calming likely reflects health and stability, not loss. Let that reassurance settle over you now, too calm and steady, exactly like healthy connection tends to become. Researchers studying who tends to find twin flame belief particularly compelling have noted a recurring pattern worth mentioning gently here: that periods of grief, loneliness, or significant emotional loss often correlate with heightened interest in twin flame concepts, specifically more so than during calmer, more emotionally settled periods of a person's life. This pattern makes considerable intuitive sense when examined closely. Twin flame belief offers a particular kind of comfort during difficult emotional periods: the reassurance that deep, meaningful connection remains possible, even destined somewhere ahead, regardless of present loneliness or however isolating current circumstances might currently feel to someone moving through them. Psychologists studying meaning-making during difficult life periods more broadly note that humans generally across nearly every culture studied tend to reach more actively toward larger frameworks of meaning and hope specifically. During genuinely hard times, a well-documented, deeply human coping pattern extending considerably beyond twin flame belief, specifically into countless other spiritual and philosophical frameworks throughout history. There's real, genuine value worth honoring in this particular pattern, rather than viewing it purely with concern or skepticism. Turning toward hope during difficulty is an entirely reasonable, healthy human response to genuine pain, one that has likely helped countless people move through periods of loneliness or grief with somewhat greater resilience and a stronger, steadier sense of forward momentum than they might have otherwise found completely alone. If you've ever reached for a comforting belief or framework during your own difficult period, that reaching reflects genuine strength and resourcefulness, not any particular weakness or naivety on your part. Tonight, whatever grief or loneliness you may quietly carry, may you feel, at least for now, genuinely less alone. Beyond grief and loneliness specifically, researchers have also noted that major life transitions, more broadly, career changes, geographic moves, the ending of a long relationship, the loss of an important identity or role often correlate with heightened interest in twin flame belief and similar spiritual frameworks, searching for deeper meaning and direction. Major transitions, by their very nature, tend to disrupt a person's established sense of identity and daily routine, creating a genuine, often uncomfortable period of uncertainty about who they are becoming and what specifically comes next in their unfolding life story. During these particular transitional periods, frameworks that offer clear narrative structure that suggest current difficulty carries larger, meaningful purpose, leading towards something significant ahead, can feel especially appealing and genuinely comforting compared to sitting with open, unresolved uncertainty alone. This pattern extends well beyond twin flame belief, specifically into countless other meaning-making frameworks people commonly turn toward during major life transitions: religious conversion, renewed spiritual practice, career reinvention narratives, even significant shifts in personal philosophy or worldview more broadly. Human beings across recorded history have consistently sought clearer narrative structure, specifically during periods of genuine uncertainty and significant change. A deeply human pattern extending back considerably further than any modern spiritual movement currently in existence. If you yourself are moving through some kind of significant transition right now, whatever form it happens to be taking in your particular life, that reaching toward meaning and clearer structure is entirely natural and expected, not any kind of unusual or concerning response to genuine uncertainty. Tonight, in this quiet moment, you don't need to have every answer figured out. Just this steady, unhurried rest is enough for now. Psychologist Abraham Maslow, whose research into human motivation remains widely referenced across psychology even decades after its original development, identified belonging and love as fundamental human needs sitting close to the foundation of what drives human behavior and well-being more broadly, alongside more basic physical needs like safety and security. Later researchers, building on and refining Maslow's original framework, have consistently confirmed this basic finding through additional, more rigorous study that humans across virtually every culture examined show a genuine, deep, largely universal need for meaningful connection and a coherent sense of belonging within some kind of larger community or relationship structure. This need doesn't simply disappear or diminish when circumstances make genuine connection temporarily difficult to find or access. If anything, research suggests this fundamental need often intensifies noticeably during periods of isolation or disconnection, driving people to actively seek out frameworks, communities, and relationships capable of meeting that persistent, deeply rooted need in whatever form becomes genuinely available to them at that particular time. Twin flame belief, examined through this specific lens, can be understood partly as one particular way. This universal, entirely ordinary human need sometimes expresses itself, reaching toward the promise of profound, guaranteed connection during periods when that same connection might otherwise feel genuinely uncertain or difficult to find through more conventional means. This reframing doesn't require judging the specific belief itself one way or another. It simply invites recognizing the deeper universal need quietly underneath it, a need every single person listening right now shares equally, regardless of whatever specific belief or framework they might personally hold about love, connection, and fate. That shared need, gentle and constant, lives quietly in you too tonight as you rest. It's worth pausing here to state something clearly and directly, something easily lost amid all this careful, grounded psychological explanation. Twin flame belief, whatever its scientific standing, can offer genuine, real comfort to people navigating uncertain, difficult chapters of their lives. And that comfort itself deserves real respect rather than dismissal. Psychologists studying belief and coping more broadly have long recognized that meaning-making frameworks, whether religious, spiritual, or philosophical in nature, can provide genuine, measurable psychological benefit during difficult periods, improved resilience, greater emotional stability, and a stronger overall sense of hope moving forward through hardship, regardless of whether every specific claim within that particular framework holds up to strict, rigorous scientific scrutiny. This doesn't mean every single application of twin flame belief is equally helpful or healthy, since, as we've discussed already tonight, certain specific patterns within it can occasionally reinforce unhealthy relationship dynamics. For some people in some circumstances, it does mean the belief system as a whole shouldn't be dismissed purely as foolish or without any genuine value, since for many people it genuinely does provide real comfort, community, and a sense of hopeful meaning during otherwise difficult, uncertain periods of their lives. Comfort and critical understanding aren't necessarily opposites here, working against each other. It's entirely possible to hold both, simultaneously appreciating genuine comfort a particular belief provides, while also staying gently, honestly aware of its more grounded psychological underpinnings and occasional limitations. Whatever comfort you personally draw from any framework in your own life, whether spiritual, psychological, or simply personal, that comfort is worth honoring fully tonight without needing to resolve every underlying question before allowing yourself to rest peacefully within it. Vulnerability, the willingness to openly share genuine feelings, fears, and personal experiences with another person, plays a remarkably powerful, well-documented role in how quickly closeness develops between two people, regardless of how that particular connection first began. Researchers studying relationship formation have found consistently that mutual reciprocal vulnerability, two people gradually sharing increasingly personal information back and forth with each other, tends to accelerate feelings of closeness considerably faster than more guarded, surface-level conversation typically allows for on its own. This happens partly because vulnerability signals genuine trust, and trust, once offered and reciprocated by another person, tends to generate more trust in return, creating a naturally reinforcing cycle that can build significant closeness within a relatively short amount of shared time together. Twin flame stories very often include an early, unusually deep conversation as a key part of their overall narrative. Two people who happen to speak with striking, unexpected honesty almost immediately upon meeting, sharing personal histories, fears, or hopes they don't typically share readily with anyone new so quickly. Understood through this more grounded psychological lens, that specific detail makes considerable sense without requiring any cosmic explanation at all. Two people willing to be unusually open and vulnerable with each other quickly will likely feel unusually close quickly, a natural, well-documented, replicable psychological outcome, rather than necessarily conclusive evidence of any singular fated fit between them specifically. Vulnerability in this sense is less a sign of destiny and more a genuine skill and willingness, one available to you in any relationship, anytime you choose to offer it honestly, and are met in turn with someone equally willing to receive and reciprocate it warmly. Building directly on the previous point about vulnerability, psychological researchers have actually studied this specific mechanism quite deliberately, developing structured exercises designed intentionally to accelerate genuine feelings of closeness between two complete strangers within a controlled, relatively brief research setting. These structured exercises typically involve a carefully designed sequence of increasingly personal questions, moving gradually and deliberately from lighter, more casual topics toward considerably deeper, more vulnerable personal disclosure, exchanged reciprocally back and forth between two participants over a defined, focused period of shared conversation together. What researchers have consistently found is genuinely remarkable when you consider it closely. This specific structured approach reliably, measurably increases felt closeness between participants, often quite significantly, even when those two participants had absolutely no prior connection or relationship history together whatsoever. Before the exercise itself began, this finding matters considerably here because it demonstrates something important and genuinely worth understanding, that intense, rapid closeness isn't necessarily a rare, singularly fated occurrence reserved specifically for one uniquely destined match. It's a replicable, well-documented human capacity, one that can be intentionally activated quite reliably through the right specific structure and genuine mutual willingness between essentially any two people, given the right particular conditions for it to unfold naturally. This doesn't diminish how meaningful a specific instance of rapid closeness might feel to you personally whenever or however it happens to occur in your own life. It simply offers a grounded, hopeful reminder that this particular capacity for closeness lives within you, genuinely available, not something reserved exclusively for one singular cosmically destined person alone. Perhaps the most well-known example of this specific research approach comes from a study developed by psychologist Arthur Aaron and his research colleagues, first published in the mid-1990s, involving a carefully structured set of 36 increasingly personal questions designed specifically to build closeness between two study participants over a single focused session together. The questions themselves progress deliberately and gradually, beginning with lighter, more casual prompts before moving steadily toward considerably deeper, more vulnerable territory. Personal values, meaningful memories, honest fears, genuine hopes each participant might not typically share so openly with a complete stranger under ordinary everyday circumstances. Following the full set of questions, participants in the original study also completed a final sustained period of direct eye contact, together, a detail that has since become almost as widely known and discussed as the questions themselves. Within broader popular culture, this particular study gained considerable additional public attention years later, when it was featured prominently within a widely shared personal essay, helping introduce the specific exercise to a much broader general audience, well beyond the original academic research community it was initially designed for. What's genuinely striking, considered directly alongside twin flame belief specifically, is how closely the felt outcome of this structured exercise, rapid, unusually deep, meaningful closeness, developing quickly between two people, mirrors the exact same experience. Twin flame believers often describe as singularly cosmically fated, and entirely unique to one particular match alone. The 36 questions demonstrate clearly that this kind of rapid, striking closeness can in fact be deliberately created between virtually any two willing participants, given the right specific structure and genuine mutual openness, shared honestly between them. Taking this specific research, finding a step further, it's worth considering directly and honestly, without judgment attached, that some of the intense, sudden closeness people describe experiencing with a new romantic partner, subsequently labeled as twin flame connection, may actually be produced through mechanisms genuinely quite similar to those carefully studied structured intimacy exercises. Extended eye contact, rapid mutual vulnerability, focused undivided attention, exchanged closely between two people over a relatively short period of shared intentional time together. Two people meeting under emotionally significant or unusual circumstances, a chance encounter, a particularly meaningful shared moment, an unexpectedly deep and honest early conversation, may naturally stumble into a version of this exact same accelerated intimacy process, without ever consciously intending to, or fully realizing it's happening in real time. The resulting felt experience, considerable, sudden, striking closeness with someone new, can feel genuinely remarkable and even inexplicable in the moment. Entirely understandable, given how intense and unusual that particular felt experience often is, compared to more typical, gradually building everyday interactions. Labeling that specific experience as evidence of cosmic destiny is one available way of making sense of it. Understanding it instead as a genuine, well-documented psychological process, one available in some form to virtually any two people under the right specific circumstances, offers another equally valid, considerably more grounded way of making sense of that exact same powerful feeling. Neither explanation necessarily diminishes how real or meaningful the experience felt while it was actually happening. They simply offer two entirely different lenses for understanding precisely the same underlying, genuinely human experience of rapid, striking closeness with someone new. Returning once more to attachment theory, since it offers such a genuinely useful, grounded framework for understanding so much of what we've discussed together tonight, it's worth emphasizing clearly just how early these particular patterns actually begin forming within each person's individual life. Attachment researchers have found that a child's earliest relationships with primary caregivers, typically established well within the first 2 years of life, create foundational expectations about closeness, safety, and reliability that quietly continue shaping how that same person approaches relationships throughout their entire adult life, often in ways they've genuinely never consciously examined or fully recognized on their own. A child who consistently experienced warm, reliable, responsive caregiving tends, according to extensive research, to develop what's called secure attachment, generally approaching adult relationships with a reasonable baseline sense of trust and emotional safety already firmly established. A child whose early caregiving was less consistent or predictable, through no particular fault of the child themselves, may instead develop more anxious or avoidant attachment patterns, approaching adult closeness with somewhat more difficulty, uncertainty, or occasional wariness than someone with a more secure early foundation might typically experience. These patterns aren't fixed or permanent, importantly, since considerable research shows attachment styles genuinely can shift and become considerably more secure over time, particularly through consistent, healthy relationships or dedicated therapeutic work specifically focused on this. Understanding your own particular attachment pattern, whatever it happens to be, doesn't require judgment, only gentle, honest curiosity about where certain quiet, persistent relationship patterns in your own life might actually be originating from. That understanding, should you ever choose to explore it, can offer real, grounded clarity going forward. For someone who developed a more anxious attachment style during childhood, often shaped by caregiving that felt inconsistent or unpredictable, rather than steadily reliable adult relationships, marked by intensity and emotional unpredictability can sometimes feel quite counterintuitively more significant and more powerfully compelling than calmer, steadier relationships might feel by comparison. This happens partly because anxious attachment, according to extensive research on the subject, tends to correlate with heightened sensitivity specifically to a partner's emotional availability, meaning small shifts toward closeness or distance from a partner can feel considerably more intense and more emotionally significant to someone with this particular attachment pattern than they might to someone with a more securely established attachment style. Within this specific context, an emotionally intense, sometimes turbulent relationship might genuinely feel more like fate and destiny to someone with anxious attachment, specifically not because that particular relationship is inherently more special or more cosmically significant than any other, but because it happens to closely match, and therefore powerfully activate, an already familiar, deeply established emotional pattern formed considerably earlier in that same person's life. This is offered here gently, entirely without judgment, since attachment patterns form largely outside conscious choice or control, typically well before a person is even old enough to remember or consciously understand what was happening to them during that formative period. Recognizing this specific pattern in yourself, should any part of it resonate honestly with your own particular experience, can offer real practical clarity, helping distinguish more reliably between genuine relationship compatibility, simply a familiar emotional intensity that closely echoes an older, considerably more familiar pattern from earlier in your life. On the other side of that same relational dynamic, someone who developed a more avoidant attachment style during childhood, often shaped by early caregiving that felt distant, dismissive, or emotionally unavailable rather than warmly responsive, tends as an adult to respond to relational closeness and intensity quite differently than someone with anxious attachment typically would. Where anxious attachment often responds to relational uncertainty by pursuing more closely avoidant attachment, tends instead toward withdrawal and emotional distance, particularly once closeness begins to feel overwhelming, demanding, or uncomfortably intense in ways that feel unfamiliar or genuinely threatening to that same person's established, deeply ingrained sense of independence and self-protection. Within the specific runner and chaser dynamic so frequently described throughout twin flame stories, the runner's particular behavior pulling away, precisely when closeness intensifies, maps quite closely onto this already well-documented avoidant attachment pattern studied extensively by relationship researchers for decades now, entirely separate from any twin flame framework specifically. This isn't necessarily a conscious, deliberate choice made by someone with avoidant attachment. It's typically an automatic, deeply ingrained protective response, developed originally during childhood as a genuinely reasonable, adaptive way of managing emotional needs that may not have been consistently met or reliably answered during those crucial early formative years. Understanding this pattern doesn't excuse behavior that causes genuine, significant pain within a relationship, but it does offer considerably more grounded, compassionate context for why that specific behavior tends to occur, and why it consistently follows such a remarkably similar shape across so many different individual relationships and so many entirely different people's personal stories. Given everything we've explored together tonight, regarding attachment theory specifically, it's worth stating something genuinely practical and useful clearly here. Understanding your own particular attachment style, whether that happens to be more secure, anxious, avoidant, or some blended combination of these different patterns, can offer real, grounded clarity for navigating any relationship in your life, not only romantic ones specifically, but friendships, family relationships, and professional connections as well. Several validated psychological assessments currently exist, developed and refined by researchers, specifically studying attachment theory, that can help someone gain clearer, more accurate insight into their own particular patterns, often revealing genuinely useful information about why certain kinds of closeness feel more comfortable or considerably more difficult for that specific person to navigate well. This kind of self-understanding isn't about assigning blame or feeling any particular shame toward yourself or your own patterns, since these particular patterns, as we've discussed already, largely formed during early childhood, well before conscious choice or control could meaningfully shape or influence them in any significant way. It's simply about gaining clearer, more honest insight into your own particular tendencies, insight that can genuinely help you build healthier, more secure relationships moving forward. Whether or not any specific relationship in your life ever gets labeled with any particular fated or cosmic framework at all. Many therapists specifically work with clients on exactly this kind of attachment-focused work, helping people gradually move toward what researchers call earned security, a genuinely more secure attachment style, developed intentionally. Later in life, even for those whose earliest experiences may not have naturally provided that same secure foundation from the very beginning. It's important, gently but clearly, to state something that balances much of the more cautious psychological framing we've explored together so far tonight. Twin flame belief doesn't automatically or necessarily indicate an unhealthy relationship, and plenty of people hold this particular belief while also maintaining genuinely healthy, stable, mutually respectful long-term partnerships with their actual partner. Some couples describe using twin flame language simply as a meaningful personal way of expressing how significant and important their particular relationship feels to them, without that language necessarily implying any of the more turbulent, painful patterns, runner and chaser dynamics, or repeated cycles of separation, so frequently described within other twin flame stories, specifically found online. For these particular couples, the belief functions less as a rigid narrative template dictating exactly how their relationship must unfold, and considerably more as simply a poetic, personally meaningful way of honoring and describing a relationship that already happens to be genuinely healthy, stable, and mutually fulfilling for both partners involved. This distinction genuinely matters here because it means twin flame belief itself isn't inherently or automatically the specific concern worth focusing careful attention on. What matters considerably more, according to relationship researchers and therapists alike, is whether a particular relationship, whatever specific language or framework happens to describe it, actually demonstrates the well-established, extensively researched markers of genuine health, mutual respect, consistency, safety, and honest, open communication between both partners involved. A relationship can be lovingly, meaningfully called a twin flame connection and still be entirely healthy, just as a relationship can carry no particular spiritual label at all and still unfortunately be genuinely unhealthy or unsafe for one or both partners involved. Continuing that same important balancing thread from a moment ago, it's genuinely worth noting that the more dramatic, turbulent twin flame stories, the ones involving repeated, painful separation runner and chaser dynamics and years of unresolved longing, tend to be considerably more visible and more widely shared online, specifically because dramatic, emotionally intense stories naturally attract more attention, more engagement, and more sharing across social media platforms, generally entirely separate from the twin flame topic specifically. This creates something worth being gently aware of, a kind of visibility bias, where the loudest, most dramatic stories become disproportionately representative of the entire twin flame belief community as a whole, even though plenty of people holding this same general belief describe considerably calmer, steadier experiences that simply don't happen to generate the same kind of widespread online attention or engagement. Quieter, steadier twin flame stories do exist in genuine abundance, even if they're considerably less likely to appear prominently within search results or algorithm-driven social media feeds specifically designed to surface emotionally intense, attention-grabbing content above calmer, more understated alternatives. This matters because it means the specific picture of twin flame belief, most visible online, filled prominently with turbulence, painful separation, and dramatic reunion, likely represents a somewhat skewed, incomplete sample of the considerably broader, more varied range of actual experiences people genuinely have while holding this particular belief in their own individual lives. Whatever your own experience or relationship might look like, calm or turbulent, dramatic or steady, it remains genuinely entirely valid on its own specific terms, regardless of how visible or representative it happens to be within the broader, considerably louder online conversation surrounding this particular topic. Among the quieter, less visible twin flame stories that do genuinely exist, some believers describe their own particular connection in strikingly calm, undramatic terms, simply a deep, comfortable sense of rightness and ease with a specific partner without any of the more turbulent separation or reunion cycles so frequently emphasized within louder, more widely shared online narratives. These particular individuals often describe their twin flame connection using language considerably closer to what relationship researchers would recognize clearly as secure attachment, consistent trust, steady mutual respect, and a comfortable, sustainable sense of closeness that has notably continued growing steadily and gradually stronger over time, rather than remaining fixed at some singular, dramatic peak of initial intensity. For these particular individuals, the twin flame framework seems to function considerably less as a rigid narrative template, dictating specifically how their relationship must unfold, and considerably more simply as a meaningful, personally resonant, descriptive language for expressing how significant their particular relationship genuinely feels to them personally. This particular version of twin flame belief, considerably calmer and considerably less publicly visible than its more dramatic counterpart, offers a genuinely useful grounding reminder here. The underlying human experience being described throughout all of this deep, meaningful, significant connection with another person doesn't require dramatic turbulence or painful separation in order to feel genuinely real, valid, deeply significant to the people actually experiencing it. Firsthand, calm, steady connection can feel every bit as profound and personally meaningful as more turbulent, dramatic connection, even though calm stories by their very nature tend to generate considerably less attention and considerably less sharing across social media platforms, specifically designed to reward more dramatic, emotionally charged content instead. Turning now more directly toward well-established, extensively researched relationship science, longitudinal studies following couples over extended periods, sometimes spanning several decades, consistently find that many of the most stable, genuinely satisfying long-term partnerships actually developed considerably more gradually than popular romantic narratives, twin flame stories included, typically suggest or emphasize. Rather than beginning with overwhelming instant recognition, many long-term couples describe their own particular relationship, beginning instead with simple friendship, gradual growing familiarity, or even, in some documented cases, genuine initial indifference toward each other that only slowly, gradually developed into something considerably deeper and more significant over considerably more extended time together. Researchers studying relationship longevity specifically note that this gradual developmental pattern often correlates positively with greater long-term relationship stability, likely because slower, more gradual development allows both partners considerably more genuine opportunity to to accurately assess actual compatibility, shared values, and long-term relational fit, rather than relying primarily on that initial, often less reliable, rush of early romantic intensity alone. This particular research finding offers a genuinely useful, grounding counterbalance to twin flame beliefs' strong specific emphasis on instant, overwhelming recognition as the clearest possible marker of a truly significant, meaningful connection. Slow, gradual, quietly building closeness isn't somehow lesser or less significant simply because it lacks dramatic instant intensity at its very beginning. According to extensive relationship research, spanning many decades now, it may actually represent, on average, a considerably more reliable, more sustainable foundation for genuine long-term partnership than dramatic instant recognition alone reliably tends to provide for most couples over time. Psychologist John Gottman's extensive decades-long research into relationship stability identified something genuinely worth sitting with carefully here: that lasting intimacy between partners tends to build considerably less through occasional dramatic, singular gestures or grand romantic moments, and considerably more through the steady, patient accumulation of many small, ordinary, everyday positive interactions repeated consistently over extended time together. Gottman's research specifically identified what he called bids for connection, small, everyday moments where one partner reaches out even briefly for attention, support, or simple acknowledgement from the other, a passing comment, a small, shared observation, a brief request for help or company. His extensive research found that couples who consistently respond warmly and attentively to these small, frequent bids, turning toward each other reliably in these countless small, everyday moments, tend to build significantly stronger, considerably more stable long-term relationship satisfaction than couples who more frequently miss or ignore these same small opportunities for connection throughout their daily shared life together. This particular finding offers something genuinely valuable when considered directly alongside twin flame beliefs' strong, specific emphasis on singular, dramatic, fated moments as the clearest possible evidence of a relationship's deeper significance. Real lasting intimacy, according to this extensive body of careful research, isn't primarily built through occasional grand gestures or singular dramatic recognition. It's built patiently and consistently through countless small, quiet, everyday moments of genuine attention and care, repeated faithfully over considerable time. Whatever small moments of genuine connection you've shared with people in your own life, family, friends, or partners, those quiet moments matter considerably more, research suggests, than any single dramatic instant ever could on its own. It's worth stating clearly here, gently closing this particular thread of careful psychological examination, that holding twin flame belief and engaging honestly in therapeutic work are not in any meaningful sense mutually exclusive or fundamentally contradictory approaches to understanding one's own relationships and inner life. Many licensed therapists who work regularly with clients holding various spiritual or metaphysical beliefs describe taking a genuinely respectful, collaborative approach, one that doesn't require dismissing or directly challenging clients' particular spiritual framework in order to still do genuinely meaningful, effective therapeutic work alongside it. A therapist might, for instance, gently help a client explore what specific needs or patterns a twin flame belief seems to be meeting or expressing for them personally, without necessarily needing to declare that belief either entirely true or entirely false in any absolute, definitive sense. This kind of respectful, curious therapeutic approach tends to build considerably more trust and considerably more genuine engagement from clients than one that simply dismisses a meaningful personal belief outright, which can understandably feel invalidating or disrespectful to someone for whom that particular belief carries genuine personal significance. What ultimately matters most, from a grounded therapeutic perspective, isn't necessarily whether twin flame belief is objectively scientifically true in some absolute sense, but rather whether a person's particular relationship with that belief and with their actual real-life relationships more broadly remains genuinely healthy, safe, and supportive of their overall well-being. Belief and grounded psychological understanding held together thoughtfully, rather than treated as opposing forces, can genuinely coexist, each offering its own particular kind of value and insight into the same deeply human experience of longing for meaningful connection. Building further on that same collaborative therapeutic approach, some therapists specifically trained in what's sometimes called spiritually integrated therapy actively incorporate a client's own particular spiritual language framework directly into their therapeutic work together, rather than setting that language aside as separate or somehow irrelevant to the actual clinical process itself. This might involve, quite practically, a therapist using a client's own preferred twin flame language when discussing relationship patterns together, while still gently, carefully introducing grounded psychological concepts, attachment, patterns, healthy communication skills, realistic expectations, alongside and within that same familiar spiritual framework the client already finds personally meaningful and comfortable to work within. Research into spiritually integrated therapeutic approaches more broadly has found this kind of respectful collaborative blending can genuinely improve client engagement and treatment outcomes, particularly for clients who might otherwise feel hesitant or reluctant to seek therapeutic support at all, worried their genuine, deeply held spiritual beliefs might be dismissed outright as simply naive or unfounded by a more traditionally clinical, purely secular therapeutic approach. This particular approach requires real clinical skill and considerable genuine sensitivity from a therapist, carefully balancing authentic respect for a client's personal beliefs against the equally important ongoing responsibility of gently encouraging genuinely healthy patterns and choices, especially in situations where a specific belief might otherwise be reinforcing painful or genuinely unsafe relationship dynamics. Done thoughtfully and skillfully, though, this kind of respectful, integrated approach can offer clients real, meaningful therapeutic benefit without requiring them to abandon or set aside a belief system that continues to hold genuine personal significance and comfort for them in their own particular life. Stepping back now for one final broader perspective, it's worth noting clearly that a person's specific cultural background significantly shapes how naturally familiar or how genuinely foreign the underlying concept of fated romantic connection actually feels to them personally. Cultures with long, well-established traditions specifically emphasizing destiny, fate, or divinely ordained pairing in matters of love, certain strands of thought within Hindu philosophy, particular folk traditions found across parts of East Asia, some interpretations within Islamic mysticism, tend to provide considerably more existing cultural framework and considerably more familiar language for readily understanding and personally relating to twin flame belief. Specifically, when someone within that particular cultural context eventually encounters it, cultures with a comparatively stronger, more dominant emphasis on individual choice and personal autonomy in matters of romantic partnership, more commonly found across much of contemporary Western society specifically, may initially find the concept of a single fated, predetermined match feeling considerably less immediately familiar or intuitive, even while still often finding it genuinely appealing and emotionally resonant once properly introduced and more fully explained within that specific cultural context. This particular cultural variation matters here because it demonstrates clearly that twin flame belief isn't simply a fixed singular idea moving unchanged directly through history from one era to the next. It's continuously reshaped and reinterpreted by whatever specific cultural context happens to receive and personally adapt it at any given particular moment in time. Wherever you personally come from, whatever specific cultural framework originally shaped your own particular understanding of love, destiny, and meaningful connection, that framework, whatever it happens to specifically be, remains genuinely valid and worth real respect in its own right. Building further on that same cultural thread, researchers studying cross-cultural psychology have identified a meaningful, well-documented general distinction between collectivist cultures, which tend to emphasize family, community, and broader social harmony considerably more strongly, and individualist cultures, which tend to emphasize personal choice, individual identity, and self-determination considerably more strongly by comparison. This broader cultural distinction genuinely shapes how romantic destiny and fated connection tend to get framed and understood differently across these two general cultural orientations. Within many collectivist cultural contexts specifically, fated connection is sometimes understood as extending meaningfully beyond just the two specific romantic partners involved, incorporating broader family approval, ancestral connection, or wider community harmony directly into the underlying concept of a truly fated, destined match. Within more individualist cultural contexts, by comparison, fated connection tends to center considerably more narrowly and specifically on the two individual partners themselves, largely independent of wider family or broader community considerations and expectations. Twin flame belief, as it has spread internationally across the world over recent decades, has been actively reshaped and adapted somewhat differently within each of these broader cultural contexts, incorporating certain elements of family and community consideration more strongly within collectivist settings specifically, while remaining considerably more narrowly individual, personally centered within more individualist cultural settings by comparison. This particular cultural variation offers one final genuinely valuable reminder here, that even seemingly universal human experiences, love, longing, meaningful connection, still take on genuinely different specific shapes and meanings, depending on the particular cultural lens through which they happen, to be understood, expressed, and lived out by real people. Bringing this particular thread to a close now gently, it's worth stating clearly and directly, as a genuinely fitting close to everything we've explored together tonight, regarding culture and belief, specifically that some version of destined fated romantic connection appears in one form or another across a remarkably wide range of human cultures throughout recorded history, considerably predating and extending well beyond the modern specific twin flame framework we focused on most closely tonight. Ancient Chinese folklore includes the concept of the red thread of fate, an invisible connecting thread said to link two people destined to eventually meet, regardless of time, distance, or circumstance separating them. Many European folk traditions similarly include their own particular concepts of fated love and destined romantic union, developed independently, in most cases, from any of these other cultural traditions specifically. This remarkable, genuinely striking cross-cultural pattern, the same essential idea, destined connection between two specific people, emerging repeatedly and independently across so many different entirely unrelated cultural and historical contexts, suggests something worth sitting with quietly and gently tonight, as we now begin drawing this particular exploration together toward its close. The specific human longing for deeply meaningful, significant, perhaps even fated connection, appears to run remarkably deep within human experience itself, considerably deeper and more universal than any single specific cultural framework, twin flame belief included, could ever fully or completely contain or explain entirely on its own. That deep, shared, universal longing, whatever specific name or framework any particular culture happens to give it, lives quietly within every single person, including you, right here, right now, in this particular quiet moment together. You've stayed with me through quite a journey tonight, from an ancient Greek myth about divided souls, all the way through modern psychology, attachment theory, and the quiet chemistry of connection. And underneath every single thing we've explored together, one simple truth has remained steady the entire time: wanting to feel deeply known by another person, truly seen, truly understood, without needing to explain or perform, is one of the most universal longings a human being can carry. It doesn't matter whether that longing gets expressed through an ancient myth, a modern app, a research study, or a quiet late-night conversation with someone you trust completely. The wish underneath all of it is the same, and it belongs to nearly everyone, everywhere. Across every culture and every era we've touched on tonight, you carry that same longing too, in your own particular way, shaped by your own particular life and your own particular history. There's nothing unusual or lacking in that. It simply means you're a person fully and completely wired, the same way nearly every other person who has ever lived has also been wired. Whatever your own relationship to connection looks like right now, whether you're deeply held by someone close, quietly hoping for that kind of closeness someday, or simply resting comfortably in your own good company tonight, underlying longing doesn't need to be solved or resolved before you're allowed real rest. It can simply exist quietly alongside you, gentle and unhurried, as your body continues settling more fully now into the mattress beneath you. Here's something worth knowing: gently as your body continues to settle, every relationship you carry, every connection, past or present, romantic or otherwise, gets quietly processed by your mind during rest, especially during sleep itself. Your brain doesn't switch off completely once you drift under. It continues working quietly and steadily, sorting through the day's experiences, consolidating meaningful memories, and gently working through emotional material that might still feel unresolved or only partly understood while you are awake. This is one of the reasons a full, restful night can leave you feeling clearer and calmer the next morning, even without consciously working through anything difficult yourself. Your mind has simply been given the quiet space it needs to do that gentle sorting work on its own, undisturbed by the busy demands of your waking hours. Whatever connections you're currently holding on to, whoever they involve, however complicated or simple they might feel right now, your mind is fully capable of holding and processing all of it gently while you rest tonight. You don't need to solve anything before sleep arrives. You don't need to have clear answers about any relationship, any longing, any unresolved question waiting quietly in the back of your mind. Rest itself is doing real, valuable work right now, even though it feels like simply letting go. Let your thoughts loosen a little more, now drifting rather than gripping tightly, trusting that your mind already knows exactly how to carry everything gently through the night ahead, without needing your conscious effort to manage any of it. Sleep researchers have found something genuinely remarkable about what happens inside your brain each night, something worth knowing as you continue settling now toward rest. During sleep, particularly during certain specific stages of the sleep cycle, your brain actively works to regulate emotional intensity, gradually softening the sharper emotional edges of difficult experiences from the day, while still preserving the meaningful memory of what actually happened. This is part of why a difficult moment often feels somewhat less overwhelming the next morning. Even though the memory of it hasn't disappeared entirely, your brain has simply quietly done some of its most important emotional processing work, specifically during sleep work, that would be considerably harder to accomplish during your busier, more distracted waking hours. This nightly process happens automatically, without requiring any conscious effort from you at all. You don't need to actively think through your day's emotional moments before sleep in order for this regulation to happen. Your brain already knows exactly how to do this important work on its own, quietly and reliably, every single night, as it has for your entire life so far. Trusting this process a little more fully tonight might help you release any lingering pressure to sort through everything consciously before allowing yourself to rest. Your mind has this handled already. All it truly needs from you right now is simply the conditions to actually rest, a quiet space, a comfortable stillness, and permission to finally fully let go of the day behind you. Physiologically speaking, your body's ability to relax fully and drift towards sleep depends heavily on your nervous system, receiving clear, consistent signals of safety. When your mind feels rushed, worried, or unresolved about something, your body naturally stays in a slightly more alert, activated state, even if that activation feels subtle rather than obviously stressful. Genuine relaxation, the kind that allows sleep to arrive easily and naturally, tends to happen most readily once your mind receives clear, repeated signals that nothing urgent requires your attention right now, that there's truly nowhere else you need to be, and nothing else you need to solve in this particular moment. This is part of why slow, unhurried pacing, like the pacing of this very conversation tonight, can genuinely help support your body's natural transition toward rest. Each calm, steady sentence offers your nervous system another small, quiet signal that it's safe now to soften, safe to let go of alertness, safe to finally settle. You don't need to do anything active to receive this signal. Simply continuing to listen, continuing to breathe slowly, continuing to let your body rest exactly where it already is enough. Your body already knows how to relax fully, given the right, unhurried conditions. It's been doing this successfully every night of your entire life so far, long before you ever needed to think consciously about how relaxation actually works. Trust that same capacity, now quietly working within you, as everything continues softening gently and steadily toward the rest that's already waiting for you. One of the simplest, most reliably effective ways to support your body's transition towards sleep involves something you're already doing right now: breathing. Slow, steady, deliberately unhurried breathing directly activates your parasympathetic nervous system, the part of your nervous system specifically responsible for rest, digestion, and genuine physical calm, gently counterbalancing whatever alertness or activation might still be lingering quietly from your day. You don't need any complicated technique to access this natural calming effect. Simply noticing your breath, letting it slow gradually and naturally, allowing each exhale to feel just slightly longer and more complete than each inhale, can meaningfully support your body's own natural relaxation response, already working quietly beneath your conscious awareness. As you continue resting here now, you might notice your own breath already beginning to slow somewhat, all on its own, without any real effort required from you. That's your body doing exactly what it's designed to do, gently downshifting toward calm. The longer it receives steady, unhurried signals like this one, that it's finally safe to fully relax. There's nothing you need to force or control here. Just continue breathing naturally, letting each breath come and go at whatever gentle pace feels most comfortable and easy for you right now. Your body already holds all the wisdom it needs to guide you gently towards sleep tonight, breath by breath, moment by moment, exactly as it has every single night before this one, all throughout your entire life so far. Here's a gentle closing thought worth sitting with tonight. Many of the same physiological processes that create a felt sense of warmth and safety within close human connection, the calming effects of oxytocin, the settling of your nervous system into a parasympathetic, restful state, closely mirror the very same physiological processes that support deep, restful sleep itself. This means the warmth you might feel during a genuinely close, safe connection with another person, and the warmth you're likely beginning to feel right now as your own body settles towards sleep, aren't actually entirely separate experiences from each other. They draw on remarkably similar, underlying biological processes, your body's own natural capacity for calm, safety, and rest, available to you both in connection with others and in quiet, peaceful solitude like this. You don't need another person present with you right now in order to access that same underlying sense of warmth and safety. Your own body already carries the full capacity to generate that feeling internally, quietly, right now. Simply through rest, through slow breathing, through the simple, gentle permission to finally let go of the day. Whatever connection you long for, whatever connection you already have, that same warm, safe feeling is available to you tonight, directly through your own body's remarkable, entirely natural capacity for rest. Let that warmth settle fully into you now, gentle and complete, exactly like the warmth of being truly, safely known by someone who genuinely cares for you. As we near the close of our time together tonight, it's worth returning once more to something we touched on earlier, gently reinforced now as you continue settling towards sleep. Whatever connections filled your day today, conversations, small moments of closeness, perhaps even thoughts about people you care deeply about or wonder about your calm, resting mind is already quietly working through all of it right now, sorting gently without requiring any active effort from you at all. This gentle processing happens most effectively precisely when your mind feels calm and unhurried, exactly like it likely feels right now, rather than rushed, anxious, or actively straining to work through anything consciously. You've given your mind exactly the right conditions tonight to do this important quiet work. Well, a calm, unhurried pace, permission to simply rest without needing to solve anything, and the gentle trust that whatever needs processing will be handled naturally, safely, without your conscious effort required. There's nothing more you need to do right now. No connection to analyze, no relationship to figure out, no longing that needs a clear, complete answer before you're allowed to finally rest. Your mind already has this. Let yourself trust that fully now, releasing any last quiet pull toward figuring things out, and simply allowing your thoughts to soften gently into whatever comes next. Sleep drawing closer now with every steady, unhurried breath. Here's one final gentle release, worth offering yourself tonight. Whether or not any particular belief about destiny, fate, or cosmic connection resonates with you personally, there can be real, immediate relief simply in setting down for tonight at least any pressure to search for or figure out what your own fate might specifically hold. You don't need an answer right now about who you're meant to be with, what your life is meant to look like, or which connections in your life carry cosmic significance versus which are simply wonderfully ordinary. That search, however meaningful it might feel during your waking hours, can rest now too, set down gently alongside everything else you're releasing tonight. Whatever your life holds ahead of you tomorrow will still be there to hold it, fully capable of unfolding in its own time, without needing to be solved or predicted completely tonight. Right now, in this particular moment, the only thing that truly needs your attention is simply this: the quiet, steady rhythm of your own breath, the gentle weight of your body, finally settling fully into rest. Let the bigger questions wait. They'll still be there tomorrow, patient and unhurried exactly as they are right now. Tonight is simply for rest, nothing more required of you than that. As we come to the very close of our time together tonight, here's a final gentle truth worth carrying with you into sleep. Real comfort, the kind that genuinely sustains a person through both easy and difficult chapters of life, tends to come considerably more often from steady, ordinary connection than from any singular, dramatic moment of cosmic destiny. A friend who checks in consistently, a family member who remembers small details about your life, a partner who shows up reliably again and again through the quieter, less dramatic moments that make up most of any real, lived life together. These steady, ordinary connections, easy to overlook, precisely because they don't announce themselves dramatically, are often where the deepest, most sustaining comfort genuinely lives. You don't need a fated singular twin flame in order to experience genuine, meaningful connection in your own life. That connection is available to you already quietly, in whatever ordinary relationships you already hold, and in whatever new ones you'll continue building throughout your life ahead. Whatever destiny does or doesn't hold for you specifically, the steady, ordinary connections available to you right now, and the quiet comfort you're offering yourself, simply by resting well tonight, are entirely real, entirely valuable, and entirely enough exactly as they are without needing anything more dramatic to prove their worth. And so gently we arrive at the final thought for tonight. Resting well, allowing your body and mind to fully soften and let go after a long day, isn't separate from connection at all. It's actually a quiet, deeply meaningful form of connection in its own right. Connection with your own body, your own mind, your own simple, ongoing need for care and gentleness. Every night you choose rest over continued striving, you're offering yourself something genuinely valuable. The same kind of steady, reliable care you might hope to receive from someone else entirely. You don't need another person present to receive that care tonight. You're already offering it to yourself, simply by staying here, breathing slowly, letting your body settle fully into stillness. That's enough. That's genuinely, completely enough. Whatever you were searching for when you first pressed play tonight, some understanding of connection, some quiet company during a late hour, some gentle path toward sleep, I hope you've found at least a small piece of that here with me, tonight. Let yourself rest now, fully and completely exactly as you are, held gently by your own quiet care for yourself. Thank you for spending this time here with me. Until next time, good night.